Chairperson Bagwell. Here. Vice Chair Fontanez. Here. Member Blackwood.
Here.
Member Bunkowski.
Here.
Member Cooley.
Here.
Member Giorlani.
Here.
Member Hillis. Member Keller. Member Howell.
Here.
Member Robinson.
Here.
Member Tussey. Member Schutte.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Okay, we're going to move on to public comments. I'm waiting for you, Ann. I can see you just, okay, I know, but I'll see no public comment, then we'll move on. Now, I saw late material for the minutes, but since they weren't posted, did they get posted in time for consideration today?
They did not.
They did not. Okay, then we're going to move on, but please read them for the next time so we're prepared for any changes. Ms. Budge, do we have any modifications that you know of to the agenda?
No modifications.
Okay, does anyone else have anything they need to change the order? Okay, then we'll proceed as agendized. So we're going to move on to item 3A, which is discussion and possible action to approve the sign plan for the Carson City Rifle Range. Member Howell.
Okay, if you'll take a look at Exhibit A, I've met twice with the Parks Department. Dave was gracious enough to take myself and Sheena to peruse the area and take a look at all the spots that needed signage. And then we met, Lori and I met with him again to go over the master plan, which is your Exhibit A, to show the signs that we were looking at doing. And have you all had a chance to look at that? Because that's what we're going to be voting on using, is this signage to conform with the master plan.
Thank you, Ms. Howell. Does anyone have any questions, suggestions, updates? You like it, don't like it? Any thoughts? Oh, this is going to be an easy day. I will say on the record, the nice thing is, thank you very much for aligning this with the park signage master plan that we have. So I really like that it's in keeping with the existing plan and then should dovetail well into our next proposal that we're going to discuss on sponsorships and things of that nature. So thank you very much for coordinating and having it all aligned, because I think that's helpful so that our entire park system follows the master sign. So thank you. So anybody, just one more time around? Any public comment on item 3A for the sign plan? Okay, seeing none, I'll accept a motion then on this. Make a motion?
Can I make the motion?
Absolutely.
All right.
I just don't.
I'm going to make a motion that the committee votes and approves the signage to correspond with the city's master plan for signs.
So your motion is to approve the plan as submitted?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to double check. Do I have a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes. Supervisor Bunkowski?
Later on the agenda, there's an item that addresses sponsorship of the signs, but I think it might be appropriate if we can discuss some of that now, since we're actually approving
The sign.
potential signage now. So I'll leave that to you, Ms. Chair, whether you want to discuss the sponsorship portion of this now or wait.
I think if you have something pertinent of the sponsorship that would impact our discussion on approval of the sign, is there something that you think on the sign we need to adjust to allow the sponsorship?
I think that the types of signs that go around the perimeter would be dictated by the ability to find sponsors for them. So in other words, you may want to have the signs that are here, the illustrated signs here, in line of sight of the roadways. But I don't know that it would be appropriate to have these signs around the entire perimeter. I don't think that there's any opportunity for sponsorships of those signs. And I think that we could go with something that's less expensive around the perimeter and just keep these signs, which are obviously more expensive and more educational, where they're more apt to be seen.
I think I actually concur with you, and I believe if you look into the opportunities for the sponsorships, that the boundary signs, while they could be there, was not recommended. Because I agree with you, the actual boundary signs aren't that effective for a fundraising tool. So I think your comment is valid, but I don't think it actually impacts the signs themselves. So I think you're right that the sale of signs on the boundaries for people to pay $100 or $300 is probably non-existent, so. Mr. Shooty?
I remember discussing a while back on, I believed anyway, on boundary signs. Are we talking about the no trespassing signs that have to be spaced according to?
Right,
the law?
150 feet.
And weren't we talking about like a cheap plastic no trespassing sign, not these expensive signs?
There, if you look at your attachment, those are the single signs that go out all around the perimeter.
Right.
They would be
but
minor.
Brad was talking about boundary signs, which are going to surround the entire range. We wouldn't be looking at these for boundary signs.
These kind,
Right.
right here.
Okay.
Right, and that's what I said. I agree with him that I don't think they're very conducive to sponsorships.
Okay.
Mr. Navarro, did you want to comment?
Yeah, so for the record, this is Dave Navarro, Parks Operations Superintendent. When we put in the request for the grant for NDOW, we asked for like the boundary signs, and those were strictly just like a Carsonite. And what I put together there was just to have a Carsonite, which is kind of like a composite, like plastic, and then just to have like stickers on there that say, like warning, you're entering into like a shooting area or an active like shooting area. They weren't meant to have like a sponsorship on them at that time. So it was just more, these signs that you see here are more for at the bays, on the range where people are there all the time, so.
Maybe I can clear this up a bit. The signs we're looking at here are, let's call them the interior and the informational signs. The caution signs apparently are going to be the same thing, but they're going to be out of, what'd you call it, Carsonite? And that's verbiage that the district attorney's going to come up with to put on those for the perimeter signs, for the warning and caution signs.
Well, that's how I understood it.
Yeah.
We talked about boundary signs, and we were talking about these nicer signs.
We're not. Yeah. Okay. Okay, we're on motion. Is there any further discussion? Okay, so all in favor of recommending approval of the sign plan as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, then we're going to move on to agenda item 3B, which is discussion and possible action to make recommendations to staff and/or the Board of Supervisors regarding the draft proposed range opening interim plan, range fee schedule, and sponsorship opportunities. Ms. Budge or Member Blackwood, who wants to start off with the discussion item? Ms. Budge?
Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. At the last meeting, Member Blackwood submitted a proposal for review and comment, so we put that on the agenda, and that's part of this item. And we have it attached in your packet. I think on some of them, though, when it went to PDF, it doesn't show all the red line changes, so I'm going to try to pull that up and then clarify. The DA's office and myself went through and sort of commented and edited that, and perhaps Mr. Blackwood can present his proposal, and then I'll pull up those changes and I can read those back to you, if that would work.
guess I need to turn this thing on. Bob Blackwood. The range would be open Tuesday through Saturday by entities who have the ability to have the proper insurance and also to include range officers. So that would be clubs, commercial entities, law enforcement. They could make a reservation, go out and use the range. The range would be open to the public, but anybody from the public who came in would have to join in the activity of the club and participate according to the rules of the club. They could still shoot, but they had to shoot with the club and follow their rules and regulations. The commercial entities would need to have a business license, a city business license. They would need to have an appropriate representative that is RO qualified in order to be able to use the facility. They would not be required to take walk-ins or people from the public into their training exercise or their CCW class or whatever it is that they were putting on. Same way with law enforcement. They would not be required, of course, to accept anybody from the public. Now, since then, I've had some thoughts about this that occurred to me because there's going to be some, I noticed that part of the Park and Rec designation was that under item 3 above, it says frangible ammunition will be required Mondays through Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. when the Carson landfill is operational. Landfill is closed Sundays and so on and so forth. During these times, it will be required signed acknowledgement from all participants about this requirement. If this is going to stand, then opening the range for these other entities to use it is sort of a waste of time because nobody is going to cough up the extra expense to shoot frangible ammunition because frangible ammunition costs 2 to 3 times the cost of regular ammunition. If we go out to do a competition, we may shoot 200 or 300 rounds a day in that competition, and nobody is going to cough up $300 or $400 to buy the ammunition to do that. Now, and also under item 4, it says the Park and Rec Director or their consignee may authorize exceptions based on the Carson City Municipal Code and safety concerns. So does that mean that that our fine director can offer the opportunity to these shooting clubs to say you don't have to use frangible ammunition? Otherwise, I believe that this is a lost cause. Now, to add some further teeth to this thing, I have the following additions that I would like to make to this proposal. One, I've made a couple of assumptions. Anytime that you do a plan, there has to be assumptions someplace. Assumption number 1, the club members and the commercial entities are the most responsible and enthusiastic about keeping the range open. They understand and adhere to the gun safety rule number 4, beware of your background. They are aware that they are responsible for every round fired downrange until it comes to its final resting point. They also understand that standing at that resting point is a lawyer. Now, you can take that any way you want, but that's part of the responsibility. Assumption number 2, the most likely cause of errant rounds leaving the range are the improper shot placement by uneducated or irresponsible shooters. These individuals are the ones who need to be under the supervision of an RO. During the range days, Tuesday through Saturday, these individuals could only shoot with a club entity who has an approved reservation, and the walk-ins must adhere to the club's rules and procedures. With those assumptions, I recommend the following 2 rules. 1, if a round is reported leaving the shooting range, now caution needs to be administered here to be sure that the reported errant round actually did come from the range and not from a freelancer shooting in the bush. The reservation schedule would be reviewed to determine which club or commercial entity was scheduled at the range. If it was determined that the round actually came from this entity or club, then this entity would be prohibited from using the range any day but Sunday. Rule number 2, if a second round is reported leaving the range, then the range would be closed to all except those using frangible ammunition or during the hours when the dump is closed. So we put some teeth in this thing so that the people who say, I want to step up and be able to use the range, that they understand that if an errant round leaves that range, it is their responsibility, and the city is completely and totally within its rights to say, we've had enough, we're going to shut it down except for the days and hours when the dump is closed. So that's my recommendation, because it would be nice, and you'll notice that I've left Monday as the range is always closed. And I did that for a couple of reasons, primarily being that allows one day when there's no shooters out there, when the city can go out and do maintenance work, pick up the trash. The engineering team may need to go out there and do some research, maybe even some preliminary rebuilding work could be done. So that's a day when there's going to be nobody rattling around out there throwing lead down range that you have to dodge. So that's my suggestion. So I believe that the clubs, the people, members of the clubs, and the commercial entities are responsible, understand the problem, and will do everything in their power to keep this range open, but they need to be able to use it more than one day a week.
Thank you. We have a couple of options to discuss this report to kind of go through. So we can either go by number and say that we all like this part, don't like this part, and then discuss the sections that Mr. Blackwood recommended, but to maybe stay orderly in the process of this. Are you guys okay with this? We could just say, for instance, does anyone have any issues with number 1, which was the hours, his
Can we address it
recommendation?
one at a time?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
Okay, so in number 1, the objective is it would be closed on Mondays. Anybody have an issue with the range being closed on Mondays?
Yeah,
Ms.
I
Howell?
do. First of all, I don't think the city takes all day long to go out and empty the trash cans or have the restrooms cleaned out. That is a pretty quick in and out. So that's not an issue for me. Having the engineers out there, the range has always been able to be closed if there's going to be work done out there. So given one day shut down, how much work is going to be done in one day? It just doesn't add up to me, the necessity for closing it that day.
The reason that I chose one day to keep it closed is so that everybody knows the schedule. So that people don't go out there and find out, oh geez, they closed the range today because they were going to do some work. So the whole purpose of that was to create a dedicated schedule so that there was no question in anybody's mind that the range is always closed on Monday. But it's
So
open the
you're
rest of
only
the
going to
time.
do the work that's needed out there for the grading and installing the signs on Monday? You're not going to be closing the range any other time?
No, for the construction work, then the range will have to be closed based on the need for construction. But this is just the normal day-to-day operation of the range. Just leave it closed one day so that if they need to go grade the driveway, they can do it, if they, whatever else. But it's just merely a matter of allowing the public to know, okay, Mondays are always closed.
Okay.
That's all.
Anybody else have a comment concerning the Monday?
Yeah, I'm confused of where we're at. So item number 1 talks about only Sunday.
I think this.
So now we're talking about the other week, so.
Oh,
the
and
other
2,
days of
it's
the
all
week, so-
Wednesday.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm on the same page that everybody else is on.
Yeah, so.
It's the one with the new ready, right?
It's actually the new number 5, because if you look at number 5, it'll be open Tuesdays through
Oh,
Saturdays.
the new one. Oh, sorry.
This is what was attached and distributed. When it was converted to a PDF, it kind of converted
Sorry.
weird.
Okay,
We just got this.
Right, sorry about that, yeah.
So
So
that's why
it's
we
the
can-
5 on this,
Yeah.
right, sorry. That's true. We're ahead of each other on the different forms. So I'll just bring it up I look at parks across the system that we have and how many of them do we close one day a week or I'm trying to look at this objectively to say, do I have to be closed every Monday? Do I really have a need to be closed Monday? I'm looking I think I kind of fall a little bit with Carol in the thought process that I like all of our parks to be open to the public unless there's truly, you believe, sufficient need, or is this just for a certain time frame? Is this until we get it fully updated that we would keep it closed on Mondays, but then once we've got it
Yes.
redone, it could go back to 7 days a week?
Yes.
So maybe if we start with that
this-
premise.
This
Okay.
should be identified, in my opinion, as an interim plan that's in
Okay.
place until the reconstruction has been completed. Once the reconstruction has
Okay.
been completed, then it goes back to the Wild West and open 7 days a week and let her rip, cowboy.
I think it's appropriate that we certainly put that on the record so the public doesn't think we're going to be eliminating a long-term. Mr. Schutte?
I would direct this to Jennifer. Do we need a day closed? I mean, assuming that we could open it 7 days a week, do we need a day for maintenance?
No, not every week.
This is Dave Navarro, again, Parks Operations Superintendent. On the operations side, it is nice to have that day. For us, it's easy for us to plan if we know if we have a dedicated day that the range is going to be closed, where we don't have to, one, put out an announcement, put out a press release saying that this is going to be closed on a certain date, certain time, but it allows us to do as much as we can. One of the things that we do on an annual basis is we spray for weeds, and that's a pretty much all-day event that happens out there. Yes, it's not every Monday, but if we did have that Monday that was closed, that's one thing that we can do without having to worry about interrupting anybody who's using it. Currently, what we do out there is we're going out there probably. We're going to be ramping up here soon and probably go out there a couple more times. Well, I take that back. Before the range was closed, during the heavy use times, we were going out there about, 3 or 4 days a week. What our guys would do is they would go out, empty all the trash cans, and then they would pick one bay, and they would rake that bay and pick up as many like shells or like debris that was left over from like the weekend, the night before, whatsoever. That was about a 2-hour like process for them just to do that one like bay. If we had a full day, then we could schedule it, possibly get more people out there and maybe clean up like all of the long range. Then the following like Monday, we do the short range and so on and so forth. So for us to do maintenance stuff out there, I prefer like to see the one day, but if we can't, then we are used to closing it and going through that process as well.
So is everyone kind of okay with saying this is an interim until the reconstruction and then we could revisit whether or not we needed a full Monday? Can we is that a compromise we can all live with?
Yeah.
Mr. Robinson?
Just Steve Robinson. I know it's not possible to say a definite date, but when we're talking about interim and the end of the construction, just an idea of what that could be or will be? 6 months, a year, 2 years?
Well, we're kind of jumping ahead. I do have an update on our
Okay,
design
okay,
later,
sorry.
but I think there's some context with this
Well, you're talking about
conversation.
interim, so.
For sure. So yeah, the intent, and that's why we made the change. So the first line is a proposed interim plan, and that was definitely the intent, is until we can make the improvements. You know, this is a compromise in a different measure. So I definitely appreciate that. We did get our first set of plan sets for today. We'll have our comments and we can talk about participation in that process later. But we'll have comments in, and then at our 60% design, which would be a few weeks away, we'll have the designs done for the bays. So at that point, we could get quotes for the work done at the bays, and the bays might be able to easily get improved, and then that would be sort of the first phase that maybe we could have open, multiple days without restrictions. So that would be the first phase. As far as the long range and the other improvements, that design should be done by June, and then we'll go to bid and see what those numbers are. Does that help answer your question?
Okay, so just to put us, sorry. To put us all in the same, we're talking about this, the draft, that the latest handout, so that we're all on the same document. Thanks. So we're all agreeing that this is just gonna be for the interim plan. We've changed on number 1 that it's open on Sundays from 7 to 7, as long as there's a public RSO that's provided by the club, and that's consistent with the agreement that the board just approved and we did at our last meeting. So I don't want to assume, but I'm going to assume no changes. Everybody's okay there? Because we already discussed that. And then the last meeting that we had, we just didn't have the 2 days a week that had been determined, but staff has determined they're gonna do the Wednesday and Thursdays from 5:30 to 8. That they'll make sure we do it with city staff, not the rifle club, the pistol club. Everybody okay with that? Yeah, it's getting over. Then the next one is an item of discussion that goes over what Mr. Blackwood discussed earlier, was that we would allow it to be open Monday through Saturday from 8 to 5:30, as long, and some of the holidays, as long as, well, I think we should split this a little bit, because the holidays don't need to, if the landfill is closed, they don't need frangibles. I think we need to clear this up a little bit. Because it says landfills closed Sundays, Thanksgiving, assigned acknowledgement, but not frangibles. If it's closed, you don't need frangible, but let's discuss the use of the frangibles, because Mr. Blackwood thinks that none of the clubs would utilize it if it required frangibles. Your guys' thoughts?
We will not, our club will not go out there and shoot. Oh, as long as we have to have flangible. It's not just the cost, it's the aggravation of them jamming in the guns, and you spend more time clearing them than you do shooting. So it's just not worth anybody's time to go out there.
Okay.
So as long as that's gonna be a requirement, then we're not gonna be able to utilize the range during those periods.
Okay, any other?
There's also one more point in that regard. Frangible ammunition is fairly limited in availability per caliber.
Types.
And so it's pretty much available across the board in most handgun calibers, but for the rifle guys, there's maybe half a dozen rounds that are available in frangible. So you've basically made it completely impractical for the competition club-type people to participate if frangible is going to be a requirement anytime that the range, the dump is open. As I stated earlier, I believe that the club people and the commercial people understand the issues with the range and will do everything in their power to make sure that errant rounds don't leave that range. So I understand that if we had the uneducated type shooter out there, that frangible would be a necessary evil, because who knows where they're going to lob around. By the way, speaking of that, I've had another thought. I'll catch that later in another discussion item. Anyway, that's my position.
Anybody else? Mr. Schutte?
Just a slightly off the beaten track here, but I'd direct this to either Parks or Public Works. But since the range is closed and we have limited use of the range, and when it is open, we have the ROs from the club and things, has there been any complaint or exploration of the unsafe area for projectiles? of new projectiles that we believe have left the range? Just
I'll take that. Right, to date, no. No, we haven't heard rounds heading overhead, haven't heard them or seen them, falling around, so there hasn't been any.
Okay,
Since
just
this
to
has
kind
been
of tie
imposed.
into this fragile thing, because fragiles, they're bad news, and like everybody said, they're just kind of a waste, but
Mr. Bunkowski?
Yeah, and I would say outside of the commercial entities as a recreational shooter, if I'm taking a specific rifle out to the range to sight it in, I'm using a specific ammunition, brand, bullet weight, the whole bit. I can't use the frangible ammunition. It defeats the whole purpose of going out there. And so you're also eliminating basically all recreational shooters.
Ben Johnson, Deputy District Attorney for the record. I just wanted to chime in real quick regarding the frangible issue. I can certainly appreciate that, as Member Blackwood said, that, certainly the clubs and the commercial organizations are going to be more responsible shooters. However, we do have 2 reports that have identified structural issues with the range. And so all it takes is 1 bullet to leave the range and hit somebody, and the city's liable. I mean, we're on notice of an issue. So my recommendation would be that you keep the frangible requirement. I'm not saying it's legally required, but from a liability risk standpoint, I think that, in the interim, it would be, recommended to use.
Thank you. I think so what I really think we ought to do is take kind of a pulse. You have 2 options here. One, if we say we're not going to do the frangibles, then the option is it won't be open Monday through Saturday, 8 to 5:30. So because it's frangibles or not at all. So is the objective to leave the option for frangibles? I mean, you could take this 2 ways, or should we just make the recommendation that it's not going to be open Monday through Saturday from 8 to 5:30 until we get the reconstruction of the bays done? I think that's the real, getting right down to the brass tacks here is, what's the pleasure? Do we just want to say we don't think frangibles is the way to go because of all the other issues with those, and therefore could leave in that the landfill could be open on all holidays, or any day that the landfill is closed, it could be open. So we could expand a little bit some of the regular open shoot time, but what do you guys think about the
That was my
frangibles?
intent, is to make sure that, anytime the landfill is closed, frangible
open.
ammunition wouldn't be required at all.
Right. We'll
So
just
if
do
it's
it.
holidays or any other opportunity, there would be no restrictions on that. So I apologize if I didn't word it well,
Well-
but that's the intent of that line.
Great. Yeah, I just think we're gonna be a little bit clearer on some things so that no one questions. And when you run it to the end of a sentence, it's talking about frangible. Anyway,
In my opinion, frangible ammunition, if we allow clubs and organizations qualified to make a reservation to shoot out there, that frangible should be removed from the discussion. If we aren't going to allow those people to shoot out there, then frangible goes back into the discussion so that if the CCW people or the other commercial entities want to go out there for a training class, that they then can go out any day of the week they want to, that they can and get a reservation and shoot, but they have to use frangible. So that's the way, if we're going to allow the clubs and so forth to make a reservation 6 days, any one of 6 days a week or 5 days a week, then frangible goes away. Because we either have a confidence that these people know how to shoot and know where to place their targets, or we don't. And I understand the liability issue, but in talking with some of the shooters around the community, they say, look, we understand the problem. We know how to do it. We know where to place our targets so that we don't have this problem. If you guys don't trust us, then go pound sand. That's basically what they say.
Ms.
One
Howell?
confusion point I have on this. When you originally said if the public comes in, they need to be allowed to shoot with the clubs.
That's correct.
So you're saying if I'm in Bay 3 and the general public comes in and wants to shoot in Bay 3 with our club, we have to allow them to do that,
Yes.
even though we don't know whether they've had a safety course, whether they understand the rules. I mean, we're going to spend all of our time out there with the public going over rules, regulations, finding out if they've had a safety class, because they can't shoot with our club without having a prior safety course.
But to satisfy to some of the members of our committee who say that they don't want clubs
Dominating.
dominating the facilities, the only way that we can get around that is to say to the clubs, look, you allow anybody that walks up to join your club. I don't mean join your club, but participate with your group. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Maybe you get a new member or two.
The reason why
Absolutely
you
not,
wouldn't
until
want to
I know
do
those
that-
people-
Carol, real quick, the reason why you wouldn't want to do that is because you're opening up a gigantic can of worms when you let that person who you have no knowledge of come into your group. Now your group is taking on a huge liability. Again, speaking from the district attorney with the risk management issue, that is, you're asking for trouble in my book. If you let John Q come in there and shoot with you guys.
Then are you guys satisfied with allowing the clubs or the people who have the ability to make a reservation to go out there and shoot and reject the public? So the public can't come in at all, because the
Not
Carson
into our
Rifle.
bay.
Carson, well, but you can't have them go into another bay without supervision.
Correct, okay.
You've got a range officer out there
Lori?
that's supposed to.
No,
be
you don't have a
supervising.
range officer out there. On Tuesday through Saturday, the entities that are there are their own range officers. You don't have anybody else out there.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay,
I-
so you are the range officer. So if somebody comes in and says, from the public, because one of the discussions that we had earlier about this was that, when they said they didn't want the Rifle and Pistol Club using the range, the half of the ranges for rifle shooting on Sunday because the public couldn't shoot. So, okay, then let's let them shoot on Saturday. But then they said, well, okay, if we let them shoot on Saturday and the public comes in and wants to shoot, because we're in effect saying the range is open to the public, then the only way they can do that is to join in the participation of the club. If the clubs don't want to do that, then is the rest of the members going to agree that, okay, it's open Tuesday through Saturday, but only to organized groups, no public access?
Yes,
I am not allowing the
Yes.
public to come in without knowing who they are,
come in at 9.
that they've had a safety course, and that they know how to handle their gun. That would be such a liability on our part to just open our shooting event to anybody. We just won't have them. We won't go out there.
Cool, worked for me.
Nick?
Nick Fontanez for the record. First, the problem here that we're having at the range is rounds are theoretically striking the ground and going up and over. Why do we need to do any of this? Why can't we just have a range safety officer ensuring that rounds are being placed where they need to go? And furthermore, to address his issue with the liability, what is the possibility of somebody actually getting hit with the ricochet? I mean, if we start safeguarding against everything, I'm just saying, I could safe-proof my barbershop and still have liability. So,
Yes.
Well, we're back talking about this, the flangeable, and then we got into,
So
because I had a question
let's
regarding
just
that.
start off something. Let's break it down even smaller. So when you can't agree in the whole, then we're just gonna keep breaking it down smaller until we get an agreement on something. I mean, that's the only way I know how to approach
Madam
stuff.
Chairman?
So let's start with, should we allow frangibles? I mean, is frangible a solution that helps the overall? And you have two different arenas. So I'm gonna start with, I think you should allow frangibles for the commercial entities that are doing their CCWs and their particular training courses for certifications to make their own decisions. So I could say yes, but you have to use a frangible. I don't want to discourage people from obtaining their certifications if they want to. If it's too expensive or not the most conducive for them to do it, they can find another range. But maybe we want to start with, what about commercial and frangibles Monday through Saturday? Maybe we just start with that. What do you guys think? We can continue to allow that.
Well, is this still an interim?
Yes, we're only
Then
talking about
Let's take Monday
interim.
off of there to start with. Because we've already decided Monday was going to be closed.
Can I just remind the group, the frangible is only an interim measure until improvements are made.
Right.
Then there won't be a frangible requirement. I
Right.
just want to make sure that
Right.
no one's trying to be difficult. It's just a suggestion that was made to make something available while the landfill is open. And it provides other opportunities. I'm not saying everybody likes it. Obviously, it's very difficult, it's expensive, it has its drawbacks, but it does provide other opportunities for use when the landfill is open. So that was the only intent.
And it's
It
my
is not an intent to
understanding
have it full-time
commercial
for the
entities
future.
using
As
it.
soon as improvements are made, this restriction would go away, as would this entire document.
Right.
So I want to make that clear.
Mr. Robinson?
Just a question, Steve Robinson, on frangibles, which I'm not that familiar with, but for concealed carry classes, I think it's a 7-yard qualification. Are frangibles problematic in that exercise?
May I? We had one CCW, Christie,
Christie teaches them.
come in and talk about the class that she tried to have with the flangible. And again, her students spent more time clearing jams using it than they could shooting. So that's part of the problem with the flangible.
Frangibles.
Well,
It's okay.
I just want to remind the group too, that there are opportunities for the CCW classes to use Wednesday or Thursday nights, or Sundays as well. And we have classes going on those days as well that don't require frangible ammunition. So there are opportunities for them to use the range outside of that. So this is just if it's when the landfill was closed. It's just temporary.
Mr. Girolani?
Sean Giuliani for the record. What about, what time do you guys close at 5? On Mondays?
We're out of there by 5:30.
5:30? So what about, have the range closed all day on Monday for cleanup, but then open it, at 5:30 to 8 for open shooting? It gives another smaller window.
So let's talk about different. So are you suggesting that maybe we're going to eliminate number 3 and reword that one for the holidays, that any holiday it could be open when the landfill is closed, but maybe then change number 2 to add one more night? Is that what I heard? You wanted to add, it doesn't have to be Monday, it could be Tuesday, Wednesdays and Thursdays?
We don't have the staffing capacity to add another night right now for city RSOs.
Well, that was, the staffing was
clubs
to
could
just
do
open the
that.
gate.
Okay, so if you want them open for clubs, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, why couldn't we do Tuesday night, 5:30 to 8 for the clubs? Why not?
Number 2 just says for the general public, so I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure.
But why couldn't we do Tuesday night with the clubs with an RSO? Anybody, what about that as a,
What about open to the public though? Because the range, or the landfill is closed at that point.
yeah, if
we
it
don't
wasn't
need an
already
RSO
reserved
out
by a club, there, not everything is reserved because there's 4 bays and, I mean,
But you wouldn't need an RSO out there if,
I just
No,
really
we do
want to
not.
make sure that we have very consistent practices right now after we've been on notice by 2 reports. So right now on Sundays, we have range safety officers provided by the club. They're taking care of all of that. In exchange for that, they are able to have meeting space and they're able to have club shoots as well on Sundays. Then Wednesdays and Thursday evenings, we have open and available to the public, but we do have range safety officers provided by the city. I think if we add other nights where there's range safety officers or not range safety officers, right now I think we need to be very equitable and consistent with our rules just on an interim basis.
May I offer a suggestion?
Ms. Howe?
With the clubs on right now, it's open from 5 to 8.
5:30,
5:30 to 8.
5:30 to
30 to 8. All right. When we went out there last Wednesday, we had to stop and at 6:45. So it gave us an hour and 15 minutes to shoot. Because the range safety officer that was out there or from the Parks Department said we had to be out of there at 6:45. If we're,
That was for the week or
It was only until May 1st. Now we're open until 8 p.m.
okay, so does that
We
mean
had to
we get
adjust
to
it based
shoot
on
till-
daylight savings and schedules.
Does that mean we get to shoot until 8? Or does that mean we have to stop 15, 20 minutes earlier so that everybody can drive out by the time the gate closes?
The reason why we did 15 minutes early is because our park ranger that is out there needs to help with closing up and locking like facilities. So in order for this to work on our end and to provide that, we had to kind of time it out right. So if they can be out of there as close to 8 o'clock as possible, then they can go and continue to close up other facilities that we have in the evening. And at that time, they were only on until one park ranger schedule ended at 9 o'clock and the other one was at 8:30. So if I had one of them out there past 8 o'clock, he wouldn't be able to help lock down like facilities. And it would create a lot of overtime like for us. So that's why at 6:45 and starting May 1st, what I also put in there is like at 6:45, there would be a cold range, just to give anybody an opportunity if they wanted to change any targets. That's not mandatory, but the 7:45 is, so we can get the facility like closed, get everybody an opportunity to put their stuff away and then out
Okay,
of the
let's
facility.
specify
So,
7:45.
I think then we need to clarify about final shooting, and, we could reword this slightly, because again, I think this policy is important, that everyone's on the same page, because I also don't want to ever see range safety officers having to have, because it says 8, you're kicking me out 15 minutes early, so maybe we want to change it to final shooting time of 7:45. So yes, they've got a 15 minutes to get out, but the final shooting at 7:45 or something for clarity.
The clubs have RSOs.
Right, that's the other question. Can we open
With
the other
them.
nights?
Why is it not available to reserve? Why do we need the range safeties officers out there if the clubs can provide documentation that they've got range officers, safety officers, they've got their insurance,
They've met all the requirements.
they've met all the requirements?
That's our discussion on whether we want to add a Tuesday night for the reservations that meet all the requirements.
Why don't
Can
we,
we?
the original concept was Tuesday through Saturday, anytime you can get a reservation. If you want to be there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you have the insurance and you have a certified safety officer, you should be able to reserve the thing, and you guys don't have to worry about being out of there at 8 o'clock, sundown, sunup, whatever. You can show up anytime you want to, and do it without frangible ammunition. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this discussion, is Tuesday through Saturday. If you have the insurance, you have the certification people, you can make a reservation, you can show up, and your group can shoot. The discussion that we got sidelined into was, do you want to allow the public in? And the consensus is no. Okay, so we don't allow the public in. It's now a range activity. If you want to go out and shoot in one of these things, you belong to one of the clubs, you've passed all their requirements to join, and you're welcome to come out and join us. I mean, that does away with the frangible ammunition issue. It does away with are we going to have safety officers out there from 5:30 to 7:30? It does away with all of that. It's all gone. We have one thing, the range is closed on Monday, which I believe is necessary, but it's open the other 6 days. And Sunday, it's freelance, anybody wants to show up can bring out their hog leg and let her rip, but on the other 6 days, or the other 5 days, it's by reservation only with certification.
And then the discussion is whether or not, council is advising us that we cannot have live fire when the landfill is open. And I recognize and actually concur that we have great clubs, great RSOs, great all of that. But I still think we have a duty to protect the liability of the city also. And council is advising us that we can't be open with live ammo while the landfill is open. So that's really the discussion, is what do we want to do on that?
Then we're back to the range is open one day a week. Or
And the nights.
after 5:30 any other day. That's really what we're back to.
Right.
Or we go back to my suggestions on Rule 1 and Rule 2, that if a round goes out of the range, and based on Rick's comments, since we have been more controlling on how the shooting is done, there's no evidence of anything leaving the range. And that's even with, people out there that don't really know what they're doing. But again, I understand the city liability, and that's why I suggested these last two rules. First one being that if a round gets found going out of the range, that the entity that was shooting when that happened, they're kicked out and they can't shoot anymore. And if it happens twice, the range is closed back to Sundays and Wednesday and Thursday nights.
How do you prove where that round came from?
Well, that's the whole
Can't.
problem. I'll give you a good example. Now, I didn't hear this, but it was reported to me that last Friday on Channel 2 News, that they reported a house being hit by a bullet. Now, I don't know where the house is at. It may have been in Winnemucca. But anyway, the upshot was that it came from the Carson Range. Okay, so we have a bullseye on our back that if a bullet hits a marquee in downtown Las Vegas, they're gonna swear that it came from the Carson Range. So that's gonna be, we're just gonna have to live with that until we can relocate.
I think that, Sean Gerlani for the record, I think that the end game of this whole committee is to get this thing open as quickly and as safely as possible.
Correct.
And it seems that maybe we put something a little ahead of where we are engineering-wise. Where are we at, and how soon can we get what we need, like ballistic sand for the flooring out there, or the berms reinforced? How soon can we fix those to allow non-frangible ammunition in those pistol bays? So that I think is the big key right there, is what is our timeline to get just the pistol bays open, Wednesday through Saturday or Sunday or whatever the case may be. Where are we at with that?
Well, wait, I have an item later, so I think we probably should be careful about making sure we stay on the agenda item, but like I said earlier, we already got our first set of plans this morning. We're gonna talk about plan review and opportunities to participate in that. We'll have our comments in on this initial set of plans by the end of the week. Then we'll have 60% drawings in 3 weeks, and at that time, we'll have final design for the shooting bays. So we can get quotes for that. So about getting this open, we will be able to do that first, get the shooting bays open, and those would not have restrictions. And that's been, next to the long range, the greatest demand is for those shooting bays. That's the CCW classes, helps the law enforcement, it helps a lot of the general public. So there's a lot of opportunity. I just want to remind, this is just a temporary plan. I do want to clarify, we can accommodate additional evening reservations without restrictions, without frangible ammunition to provide that. So it's just a matter of scheduling, and we would block nights that maybe if the sheriff's office is in there, because they do a lot of their shooting in the evening, we'll just make sure that that's blocked and not available for reservations. And we can work with the club to work that out. So it doesn't have to just be Tuesdays. We can accommodate those other nights where we're not, the range officers from the city aren't available. So we can accommodate additional reservation opportunities in the evening. That's not a problem.
When those evening shoots, when it's open to the public and they're out there shooting, you have a range safety officer out there, you indicated on that form that there's a cold range time. it would be, I think, more prudent to, if you already have an RSO out there, that person's watching the line, and this is how it's been done for the last umpteen years, is that when they see that people have stopped shooting, and you got one person in this bay one that's still firing, that they pause and they say, okay, is the range cold? Sure. Now everybody can go down there and change at their leisure, not at, well, let's wait till, 6:15 and close it.
Yeah.
That's really unpractical. That takes away from
We
a
can
lot
work
of
with
their
the park
time.
rangers to make that happen. That's fine. We can do that.
And nothing in here, are we putting the specific time for
Well, that was
that?
just what
Yeah,
the-
but I mean, he
the-
just said that was the practice, right? So if we thought about, oh, I'm sorry.
So
Mr.
a
Bronkowski.
couple of comments. First, in regards to the house that was hit by a bullet, that was in Lyon County, is my understanding, off of Occidental. And the bullet came from a gravel pit out off of the end of Enterprise Lane. So it was somebody, most likely it was somebody that was using the Carson range that, when the range was closed, went out to any available place and was shooting, and the bullet left the gravel pit and hit a house. Going back to whether or not frangible ammunition should be used and whether the range should be open, there is an interim step here that we're not discussing, which is when the problem was first brought to our attention, rounds were leaving the range and you could hear them go overhead, and then you found rounds. So the chances of one round ricocheting, leaving the range, and hitting anything is so astronomical, I'm not sure it could even be calculated. What would happen in reality is that you would hear a round leave the range. It would go overhead, you would hear it. If that were to occur, if we open the range as we're discussing, and it's with commercial entities and gun clubs, and they have their RSOs and they have their insurance, I think we have some assurance that the range will be run responsibly. But we're also going to have notice if it's not, because we'll go back to hearing rounds leaving the range. And if that were to occur, then we can revisit this and shut the range back down and start talking about making frangible ammunition a requirement. But I think that there's that interim step there that gives us a level of assurance that addresses liability, that we can count on. I mean, it's not like you're going to have one bullet leave the range and that will be the one round. I mean, we never had anything get hit up at the landfill when it was a serious problem. Now we're talking about a controlled, supervised event. So that's kind of what I see, is that there's kind of some shades of gray here that we could be talking about.
So if I'm understanding your discussion point, you're indicating that we would allow clubs and commercial entities, not general public, on Tuesday through Saturday, 8 to 5:30, and not require frangibles? And then use any report from the landfill staff to indicate whether we have to revisit that? Is that, am I
That's
paraphrasing what
correct.
you said?
It would be, as Member Blackwood said, that we would ask the gun clubs or commercial entities to self-report, but we also have Public Works employees that are out there that would be also reporting whether they heard any rounds leaving the range. So we'd have two avenues for reporting.
Is there, anybody else have any comments on Mr. Bronkowski's thoughts?
Just that I guess I'd add Steve Robinson, that I think that's a reasonable approach and it's experiential. We'll see the evidence fairly shortly, and action could be taken at that time. There's no way to preclude make any absolute safety issue where a bullet doesn't get outside the range. That's just no matter what kind of ammo we use or no matter what kind of safety we put into place. So I think that's a reasonable approach.
So are you thinking that because but again, only clubs and commercial, no public? No, it's not a general open, you're saying you're comfortable that it's
This only
much more
works-
controlled?
It only works if it's supervised, and we've already set those parameters, which are, you have to have the insurance, you have to have your own RSOs or certifications.
Nick Fontanez for the record, listening to what Brad said and Member Robinson, I could also support something like this experimentally till we can find out what's really going on.
Madam Chair, the only thing I would ask is if you want the clubs to report any instance, along with requiring the insurance and the RSO, you need to have some rules for the clubs to follow and sign off on before they can reserve the range. So that if I know we're gonna go make a reservation and you wanna require me to report anything, right now, there's nothing that says I have to. But if you've got some rules on using the range that I sign off on before being able to make the reservation, that says in the event of an occurrence, I will report it to whomever you decide it to be reported to.
If according to Rule 1 of my amendment, my addendum to the original plan, is that if it is reported that a round leaves the range and when they go check the reservation schedule and find out that it was the gray ladies with the pink pistols that were out there shooting, then they're going to say, sorry, ladies, you can't shoot here anymore. I mean, that's basically the only rules required. Now, the other thing that I found pretty interesting, shooting IDPA last Sunday, is how conscientious that everybody out there was about looking at where bullets were ricocheting to. Because in our Bay 2 that we were shooting in, there's rocks and stuff in there. And if you didn't position the targets correctly, you'd get a ricochet off a rock and you'd see a thing bouncing up the hill. But everybody was conscientious about what was going on and repositioning targets and moving rocks and doing whatever else to make dang sure that we didn't have anything bouncing out of that bay. So
I agree. I think that if we have a requirement that the commercial entities or clubs self-report, we have the backup of Public Works who's also reporting. If they make a report and nothing was self-reported, then that group is going to be prohibited. I don't think that it would be an automatic prohibition if you self-report, because then you're not going to report. But I think that if you don't self-report and we catch you, then you're going to be prohibited from the range.
Let me just ask in my own mind, I picture 4 pistol bays, and so if, maybe there are 2 clubs out there, maybe IDP has Bay 1 and 2, and the Ladies Gun Club has 3 and 4. How are you gonna know whose bullet it was?
you don't, it's their responsibility.
But at that point, we're shutting the range back
Yeah.
down again, and we're going to institute the frangible ammunition requirement. So it's going to be in everybody's best benefit to participate and self-report. And frankly, if there's 4 groups out there and nobody reports it and Public Works does, then we're back to shutting down the range, requiring the frangible ammunition, and everybody's going to pay the price for that. So you're going to have 3 other groups out there that were there when that round left the range. They're going to be pointing their fingers at the guilty party.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's kind of like being a snitch.
Unless you've got 2 clubs out there and it's they did type of thing.
Well, regardless, I mean, we can argue that point all day long. My point is that at that point, we're shutting down the range and
I get
we're
it.
instituting the frangible ammunition requirement. Problem solved, not in a good way.
You know, the thing that needs to happen is the shooting community in entirety needs to come together. You know, because it's us against the world. so to speak. And so this infighting and finger pointing and everything else, there ought to be one goal and one goal only, and that is do everything in our power to keep that range open. Because we've got to convince City Hall that we're
Responsible.
a entity that deserves to be here. I made the mistake yesterday when I was fooling around on my computer of going on the city website. And I'm looking down through some of the things that the city fathers have to deal with. And it occurred to me that our little shooting range is just a pimple on the rear end of the city. And it's not going to take much to cut it off and throw it away. So we've got to stand up for ourselves and come together as a community to protect that entity so we have some place to shoot. Otherwise, we're going to all be driving to Fallon.
I would submit that the fact that 40% of the Board of Supervisors is here sitting on this committee is proof that it's not just a pimple on the rear end of the city.
Thank you.
And actually, I would tell you that I think the board feels strongly as a whole that it's a park that needs to be preserved. So I've not had any impressions either that it's not important. The task force wouldn't have even been created if we didn't have a majority.
I was just
Wanting to
looking at the
accomplish it.
preponderance of other issues.
Now,
that
we
you
will
guys have
agree
to
that
deal
there's a
with.
preponderance of other issues we address, but, yeah, so let me see if I'm kind of clarifying the thoughts of this committee, is to remove the frangible requirement at this time, because we will go to a self-reporting and/or a public works report, and in the event that an errant bullet is discovered in the landfill, then it's back to frangibles. And the particular club or commercial entity doesn't get to make reservations anymore unless they did the self-report themselves.
Identify the time period you're talking.
Well, that's what I'm trying to even get that we're.
Supervisor
moving
Bagwell, can
on
you
it.
clarify too that, is this general public shooting? Is it?
No general public.
I just,
Yeah.
we didn't say that, so I
Oh, we
just
did.
want to clarify.
No, we did. It was
Okay.
clubs and commercial only, no general public. The general public then is on your Wednesday, Thursdays, and Sundays.
So it
So now
still
my
require
question-
reservation to come shoot for this requirement. I just want to make sure. So that way we have all the,
Reservations.
right.
Right.
So we would have all the insurance and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
I
no,
just
all
wanna-
these other rules are in play unless somebody's thinking of something else. But we were gonna add self-reporting, right? And that Public Works would report, and some type of a form has to be signed by the clubs with a set of rules and who they make the report to, what phone number, where's the report happening? It can't just be you have to report, call such and such a phone number, blah, 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 blah. Is that what I'm getting out of the general consensus?
And just a question on reporting to whom? I mean,
So, can I make a suggestion? We, the
mean-
district attorney's office created a waiver that put a lot of acknowledgements on the club, or I mean, on the person signing it. We might be able to modify that document to make further improvements to that about reporting, about requirements. I'm also nervous about new members to a club. If I go join the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club, look, I haven't shot since I was a kid, and I wouldn't say that I'm at the level that those other members are. So perhaps there's some sort of like orientation to the range that's the responsibility of the club, or something else about new members or new shooters, because that was brought up a couple of meetings ago too, about maybe a new member might not be at the same level as some of the other members of their club. So we just really want to stop that. A lot of the issues we have, probably 90% of it is from poor shooting behavior and lack of education from those shooters. And, the 10% might be the physical deficiencies of the range. So I worry about those new members, so that they're taking responsibility to educate those new members.
Well, I think different,
I'm not sure about Carson Rifle and Pistol Club, but number one, before any of our members can come out and shoot, they have to provide us with documentation that they've had an NRA safety course, have a CCW, and then they are watched like a hawk the first few times they're out there to see that they're keeping their fingers off the trigger, that they're handling their weapon appropriately. So that again is up to the club to maintain.
I fully appreciate that. I just want to make sure that that's clear and that we want to encourage the clubs, to orient those new users to have proper safety.
I think I have another issue with the waiver. And while I want the club to do the waiver, I'm going to disagree that I need each individual member that's going to shoot of the club to sign the waiver. There isn't really a liability, or if that makes sense. So I can't be Carol Howell, the Ladies Gun Club, signing the waiver. She's going to do the reservation, provide the insurance, blah, 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 blah. But I'd like to see an individual waiver that tells the person their responsibility at the range. So I want to, does that make sense what I'm trying to say? That it sounds great to say I'm going to get a waiver from the club. No, if you're coming to shoot on Tuesday at 2:00 to our one, I'd like to see that the club makes the reservations and attaches the 20 waivers or whatever it is. Here's one for Mary Sue. Just a thought, Ben. I'm just not comfortable without individual waivers.
How about we haven't got to that part of the discussion yet about the fees, but how about when you get your permit, your daily fee pass, whatever you want to call it, that when you get that, you sign that is your waiver, okay? So if you just do it for the day, you get the little envelope and you have to sign your name on the envelope that says, okay, I agree with this. And if you get the annual fee, when you get that, you say, okay, I agree to the rules and regulations. Otherwise, I think the paperwork is going to be staggering, but let's try to keep it as simple as possible.
I have no problem with the suggestion. Mine is we will have an individual waiver. I just not comfortable saying that the club itself is going to be, I'm responsible for these 100 people and they all do what they're supposed to do. Anyway, just a thought.
Well, it's a good thought. Carol,
Thank you.
the first time I saw the waiver, I couldn't sign it. Because as the club president, our bylaws don't allow me to sign a document that's going to waive the rights of every member in that club. So I haven't made a reservation with the knowledge that I had to sign that waiver. So, yeah, that waiver is the way it is currently.
Does that make sense? One is a club acknowledgement and waiver, and then one would be an individual
Yeah.
waiver. And I have no problem with the idea of it being printed on I'm going to say something. The envelope is per vehicle.
Right.
So that's not an individual waiver.
No.
So the
I
club
thought-
would just take an individual waiver that they would be responsible for having on file before they let the person shoot at the range during this interim process.
I thought that everybody had to pay a fee, not per vehicle.
No, it's per vehicle. 'cause
Why in
you're
the
gonna
world would
put-
you do that?
Well, how else are you gonna do it? How am I gonna know if there's one person in the vehicle, 9 people in the vehicle? We'll get there. Yeah, but I'm just saying, I think the club, and there's 2 clubs here, but you can tell me, can't you, if you have 20 people that are gonna shoot during this 3-4 month period of time, that you would be making reservations, you'd gather, you won't let them reserve with you to come out and shoot if they don't sign the,
They don't shoot with us until they've signed their waiver.
there you go. I think they do it already. We'll just add or make sure that there's one from the city. I want to actually protect both parties, the city and the clubs. Do you see,
Works for me.
I don't have to put you on the spot, Chris, but do you see any issue with having someone, if they want to shoot with you, to sign the waiver? And you just keep it on file for that?
Chris Carver. I don't for the club, but I do see that for IDPA being an issue, that we're talking upwards of 50 shooters twice a month, that's 200 pieces of paper, or 100 pieces of paper. Who's managing that?
Well, they have members, right? That come and shoot? Or is that, they don't do general public?
No,
Okay.
you have to be members of their club to shoot, but right now, they don't turn they have the insurance and the assumption, or they don't do an assumption for Sunday shoots because it's open to the public.
Right.
But you're
If you're gonna do this special
doing that.
reservation.
I'm not exactly sure how you would get that done. Say they want to do a Thursday shoot, who's collecting 100 pieces of paper from them and making sure that Joe Smith has actually signed the paper before he goes and shoot? I assume you're going to put the burden on that club,
Whichever club made the reservation.
and then that envelope full of documents goes to
They just,
parks?
no, doesn't necessarily have to be turned into the city. They would maintain it. And then only if there's an issue is the form's all gonna get into place. Hopefully, we don't have any issues. Oh, I'm hoping we have no issues. I kind of have to go with that myself, but.
Jennifer Budge. So a compromise might be that we have a waiver and Ben and I can work on that for maybe a period of time. Maybe right now it's, for the season or an annual waiver, and that's valid for a time period. We can keep it on file and keep a copy, because if there is an incident, we want to make sure that we have a copy on file at the city. But if you sign up for swim lessons, you're not signing a waiver every time you go to swim lessons. You're signing one waiver for your 8-time period that you go. So I think we can work through that so we don't have 8 million pieces of paper, but
That's kind of what we talked about earlier with the signage too. That language is gonna go on those signs and.
we'll be on the
probably
signs,
more
but I
than one
think
sign.
if there's going to be
Hang on.
additional, I'm sorry.
More than one sign. I think when Dave and I went out there with Carol that one day, there was a couple places for these big signs to go, and when you read those, acknowledge them, and there's,
And we would also reprint it on the envelope.
yeah, it puts it out there for.
So I mean,
everybody
you
to
put
see
it
that
in a
they're
few
liable.
places besides the individual one they have to sign for the year, but.
So it's kind of like the swim pool, it's, the no lifeguard on duty or whatever the sign may see, or it's kind of like that.
Okay, I think we've got some general consensus, so how about we move to the number 4, where it says the Parks and Recreation Director or their designee may authorize exceptions based on the code and safety concerns. So tell me, is that then, I'm gonna say that would apply to what Supervisor Bonkowski was talking about. You would invoke that then if Public Works called and said, we're hearing bullets. And so you're gonna look up and say, okay, there went Club X, because they didn't report and they didn't da-da-da on Saturday at 2:00, whatever. Is that what that purpose would be? And then she would invoke the frangibles if necessary? Is that what you're seeing there?
I think you'd have to change the language so it doesn't just say authorize exceptions. You'd have to change it so that they have the power to provide exceptions if necessary, but also be able to invoke emergency measures to close the landfill.
The landfill? You mean the
I mean,
range?
that's
That's
range.
exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah, we're helping you out there, Rick.
Freudian slip there.
See, we're actually still paying attention. So may authorize exceptions based on the code. So again, that's not a unilateral decision. You don't think, and the safety concerns covers, you think we need a more specific than in safety concerns?
Well, it looks like they're only allowed to authorize exceptions, not take action on the other side to do restrictions. Although I believe that you already have that power, Jen, is that correct?
You want to change it to exceptions
There already is
slash
something in code
restrictions?
to allow
Right,
that.
so they already have it in code, but I think it needs to be clarified here as well, that it's exceptions and restrictions.
I was gonna say, we could just change it to may authorize exceptions slash restrictions based on the code and safety concerns. Does that work? Okay, if we move down then, the range, we agreed it was Tuesday through Saturday by reservation only. There will not be public opening on those times. the clubs, the rules, A, B, and C. Is everybody okay with those? And we're gonna add waiver, right? And participant waivers, right? That's fine?
Madam Chair, I wanted to ask a question about, Member Blackwood had in his draft approved RSOs or equivalent. I didn't know what equivalent meant and how we could establish what that meant.
Safety
So there's
office-
criteria.
Safety officers are basically the equivalent of a range officer. It's a designation thing that a lot of the shooting, for instance, IDPA uses what we call SOs, safety officers, instead of range officers. But they're still have the same
Synonymous
qualifications.
to the same thing.
They have the same qualifications. They're basically there to keep people safe. You can't handle a firearm in IDPA or USPSA without a safety officer instructing you to do so.
What is Terry Tussey?
Pardon me?
What is Terry Tussey? Does he have any certification? Because he brought this up at the meeting. He's not an RSO, but he wants to be able to go out there. He's a commercial entity. He has the insurance. He wants to be able to go out and test his guns.
Yeah, that's a gray area. I'm not sure how you're going to address that one. If of all the people that I personally know that I would trust firing a gun downrange would be Terry Tussey, but if you want to adhere by all the rules, technically, he or his assistant would need to be certified. So that's a gray area. I don't know what you're gonna. He could do that. Yeah. Yeah, could certainly do that. But that's a gray area.
Okay, let's stick with, Nick?
Nick Fontanez for the record. So my question would be then, so I just want to clarify and make sure I've got this right. Public usage would be from Sunday from 7 to 7 p.m. and to Wednesday and Thursday from 5:30 to 8 p.m. We're going to be closed on Mondays, and we're going to let commercial usage happen Tuesday through Saturday by reservation only.
And clubs. And clubs,
And clubs.
which is a lot of the public.
so-
Don't assume that doesn't mean they're not public. They all, certainly, most of them live here too.
My question would be for the entire task force here, are we gonna continue allowing the commercial and clubs to book on these public usage times?
That's, I would rather say then that and that's a discussion, because we did a contract with the club, but maybe they'll think about that, because the only one that we have is 50% of it on the 2 Sundays is them, but maybe if they now know they could do it on Saturday, they'd accept an amendment to
Or
the agreement, so
even
that
at
the
that.
public could have full use on Sundays if they could use Saturdays. I think the objective was to give them time to have their shoots, but
Well, Madam Chair, are we still not talking interim on this? I mean,
we
we're
are
still
talking interim. He's just trying to get more public access. That's the
gotcha.
sole point. I got right?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Right, we're trying to make sure that the public has use of the range. And so he's just asking if on Sundays and the Wednesday and Thursday that we not allow reservations, so that the general public has full use,
So that people like me could show up.
right? Is everybody okay with that? And then it's up to the club, the only one that, again, it has a contract, so the club would have to ask for an amendment if they're willing to switch to Saturday or something, because they'll go to the reservations.
Well, I was out there last Wednesday, and there was only one other bay being used. There were 5 of us in one of the bays, but only,
reservation.
no. So I don't know that right now, during the interim, that this is all that big a deal.
No, but I see what Nick's saying.
It's just a question.
No reservations during the public time.
We would just have, we're probably gonna need to maybe like an outside meeting with the club to try to work through this, because now the agreement's not really accurate based on this. Also, there are a bunch of reservations on Sundays. Some of them are CCW classes. People sell, those spots. I mean, it impacts a lot of people to just make a global change like that. So we'd need to work out, it's fine, but we just need to work out some logistics to be able to implement that. So I just want to be
The only
sensitive to that.
reservations on Sunday we were allowing was the 2 for,
We have 2 bays available on Sundays.
2.
And that
Half.
was to accommodate the commercial.
right. I think we have to honor the reservations that they currently have. I'm not suggesting canceling them, but I don't think we have to take any more new ones, if that makes sense. What I'm saying there, you'd push them to ask them to do Saturdays or Tuesdays or Wednesdays or,
My
Something.
suspicion is that any entity who has a reservation on Sunday now is going to switch that out to some other day of the week just because they don't want to be out there mixing it up with the public. You know, the rifle and pistol guys could take the entire rifle range and nobody's going to bother them, you know, so why in the world would they want to fool around with 10 bays on Sunday when they could have 30 bays on Saturday? And the same way with IDP or USPSA, they do the same thing. If they can have the whole outfit to themselves, why not take it? So I think we'll be surprised. I think most of the
we offer them the switch.
And you have the
but don't
same thing
cancel
with, you have the
anybody,
same thing
right?
with the CCW people, you know, they do it on Sunday now because that's when the range is open. But if they can go out there on Friday afternoon, they're gonna do it.
Mr. Robinson?
I think it's well to say we don't want to be canceling reservations, but how far out are we on reservations?
Well, that was IDP.
I mean, 3 months, 2 years, 3 years, what,
For the commercial
the
classes,
commercial?
don't we just have?
We do have the president of the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club here. I'm looking at the reservation calendar right now. There's reservations, it looks like at least through the end of the year. I know we discussed this previously, that there's on the books, you know, years in advance, but we have a 6-month interim agreement. So really those reservations are the only true reservations for now.
Right. So, okay. All right, so no changes then to A? Everybody was okay with that? Looking at commercial, everybody, I think our question was on C. We did, we got individual participant waivers on file. We added that in this one, in the red one. I'm calling it red, or track change document, right? We put including participant waivers. On the commercial, the question is, what should we strike? There is no or equivalent accountability. I think that was our question. We were, just say have approved RSOs. Right? Everybody okay with that? Carson City business license, I think everybody okay with that? They're doing business here and collecting a fee. Now the question is on E, must purchase $100 annual use permit. So we were gonna move that, you know, they have to have $100. Is that outside of their business license?
Yes.
Okay, is everybody okay with $100? And what are they gonna get then? A different, how are we gonna give them that permit? A paper?
Can we have a discussion about the commercial use? If you see some comments on the side, Ben and I had a conversation about different options, so I just wanted to make sure when we start talking about fees, we really need to adopt a fee schedule for the entire facility, and that includes commercial use, drop-in use, reservations, you name it. And the Board of Supervisors is the only one that can authorize those fees. So I wanted to have a discussion about those commercial use. Now that I've referred to this before, we have here at the community center, we have classes that happen in our classrooms here, and they're independent contractors. So the typical arrangement is they have an independent contractor agreement, they have a business license, they retain 75% of the profit and 25% goes to the city for the use of the space, is the typical arrangement. They're not all like that, some have exceptions. In exchange, the city includes it in advertising the dance class or the yoga class or whatever it is in the activity guide. We can put links on the website, and we help promote that. And it's open and available to the general public. So I didn't know if the task force wanted to consider an option for that for the commercial users, because then we can help promote those CCW classes and in turn promote more responsible shooting by doing an avenue like that. So if Dave owns a company and he comes forward, we could do it, the city would enter into an independent contractor agreement with them. They would charge, whatever the fees were, and then those revenues would be apportioned out, rather than a standard fee where, the incentive is we want them to make more money. We want them to, have a lot of classes, but we want to promote that promotional shooter or the educational shooter. And the city would help promote those classes. So I just wanted to make you aware of that option and see if that would be something that you think would be a good fit. But I was also just
I
trying
like
to
that
be
as long as it
fair and
has a minimum.
equitable with what we have already going on.
So long as it has a minimum, I'm okay with that. I don't want somebody, 2 people showed up and you get $8. So long as it has a minimum.
There's typically minimums identified in the
Okay.
contract.
So I like it. I like anything that matches and is consistent with other city policy, personally, for me, because it makes it easier for them to administer, because it's consistent throughout the use of any city property.
It wasn't part of the fee process, for maintenance, so what?
Oh, we can direct,
Yeah,
we
what are
can
you
make a
gonna,
recommendation in here that it's directed to come back to the,
because the overall plan, again, would be to establish construction, barriers out there that we won't ever have a ricochet problem out there,
2 different
and
things.
that's kind of pricey.
I would also recommend that we, as Jen said, that we approve a fee schedule, which we'll get to, but that should be an addendum to the plan. And we should remove
that's
any
ongoing.
specific dollar references within the plan. So that way we can change the fee schedule at will without changing the plan.
I agree completely, because this part's just gonna be interim, but we could do an Exhibit A, which is a recommended fee schedule, because as she indicates, we can only recommend to the Board of Supervisors a fee schedule, so I agree with doing that anyway.
Madam Chair, I have another question on this. If you've got out-of-county businesses coming in, would you have a different pay schedule for them than you would a Carson City that pays a city license and,
Everybody has to get the city business license, even if they're out of town, gotta get a business
but
license.
CCW classes, instructors are coming in from Reno, from Sparks, Lyon, all over from out of county, and they don't have a Carson City business
So
license.
we're
they
gonna
can't get a
require them
reservation.
to. They're not gonna be able to reserve or do it here unless they get a city business license.
Okay,
So they're gonna go in and pay, it's $63.85 because they won't have a facility, so they'll pay the $63.85. Happen to know that fee. My office is in the business license, I can hear them all day long talking to people, but anyway. So they'll pay $63.85 for the city business license, and then they'll do an independent contractor agreement with us on a revenue sharing.
okay, then how much of that
Methodology.
$63 is gonna go to the range
That
funds?
It will not. The business
Okay.
license is the business license, and that, we don't pull out any money out of the business license. That's just a revenue source to a specific. But the fees that we will collect on the revenue sharing agreement will be on an independent contract agreement, and we can recommend to the board that those be funneled to an account on behalf of the range or something, whatever we name it. So not the business license. But that is how we get the out-of-county people who I think technically and legally need one anyway, because they're doing business in our city.
I agree.
So I think they've already technically supposed to have had one.
And I've always objected to them coming in and taking our residents' time and spot on a park that they pay taxes on, and they come in and use our range, eliminating
Let me
that.
ask a question of the, Ben, if I may. I think I've seen some prior documents on something else from you, but can we have 2 different revenue sharing agreements? So it, just as an example, a 75-25 if you're a local instructor with a business license, but maybe I'm gonna do 50-50 if you're an out-of-county revenue sharing.
I believe that would be acceptable.
So, I mean, there's some right? We might want to say, hey, this is the deal if you're a CCW or a commercial entity residing in Carson City versus you're from Reno coming in, you're only going to get a 50-50 revenue sharing. Wow, whatever. So I wanted us to keep that in mind, that we may want to set up tiers in the revenue sharing. It's an idea. Okay. We'll, like I said, we'll pull so on the BE, we'll pull that out because it's going to go on to a separate schedule, but everybody okay with the match policy with a minimum instead of setting it as $100? He's okay with that? All right. On the law enforcement component, I think that should become a C, right? So we have clubs, commercial, and law enforcement. Should be not underneath commercial. I think it's just a mechanical problem there. See what I meant? Okay. So I'm assuming everybody's okay with the law enforcement.
As far as.
They have to have their own RSO, no equipment.
They have a
Right.
master.
They have a range master, they follow the rules, and we've already struck, nobody's required to take the public walk-ins, of course. We talked about that already earlier. Okay, on 6, this'll be the discussion. All shooters must have is it all shooters or all vehicles? A day use or an annual use? I thought about that. Right? I'm not gonna carry it on me. The guy coming in isn't gonna say, Jennifer, let me see yours, you, let me see yours. It's gonna be, they put this on the car stub, right? Or they hung one of the placards. So is it a per vehicle fee?
Should be a per shooter fee.
Well, how, on the envelopes, you could write, I get number of people.
Each shooter fills out an envelope, and you lay them on the dash of your vehicle, and, I mean, it's not gonna be a Gestapo, some guy walking up and down,
No,
with
it's
his
still one
flashlight.
envelope, you put 5 people.
Well, each person has an envelope. If you got 5 people in the vehicle, each person should have to pay a daily use fee, in my opinion. Or you can buy an annual one, which allows you to get in, but,
I'm gonna hang 5
I
placards on the
mean, if
vehicle.
I spend $50 and get an annual fee, then I can load up my vehicle with 9 guys and go out to the range every day, and I've paid $50 for the year for 9 guys to shoot. And I don't think that's right. I think that everybody ought to have to pay to use that range.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
What is the, maybe we can look at how other entities do it. Maybe Jennifer can elaborate a little bit, but I'm thinking of state parks, Forest Service, BLM. Most all of them are vehicle oriented.
Vehicle, because you're just gonna
And
put
part
the
of that
stub
is
and you
just
quickly,
the nightmare of
matches.
enforcement
Right.
on it.
he
that
just matches
I
the
don't see how
envelope
you do
against
it.
the Iron Ranger envelope, and he just says yes,
And I
yes,
think
yes.
Member Robinson's correct, the majority state parks in those areas are a vehicle use. But you could get, an individual annual permit, and there are ways around it, obviously, but the park rangers would have a list of who has the annual permit. I mean, on site, I think there could be some enforcement, but it would be a challenge, and we don't have a ton of staff. So
It's not gonna happen.
I don't know, what we might want to do is we could make some suggestions for a future, maybe a draft fee schedule that we bring back. It would be good to have other entities, so you have a basis of comparison and make sure that we're being fair and equitable within the region for fees. And we're not just coming up with numbers arbitrarily.
You guys think you wanna move the fees to next meeting as its own schedule?
Let's get it going. Let's get it resolved.
Well, and when do we wanna start the implementation? Because the longer we wait to do that, then we're also not getting the recommendation for the fees to the Board of Supervisors to implement it.
Well, and I think we can move forward on the majority of this document, just operationally within the department, but, the only exception would be the fees. It just is how detailed you want the fee schedule to be.
Right,
If
so,
there's just a drop-in fee and an annual fee, then maybe it's not a big issue, but if we want to have, for reservations and, if they're, in-state, out-of-state, all these different options.
Well,
The simpler we have, the easier it is going to be for staff to monitor and enforce and implement. So if we can keep it fairly broad, that would be my preference, but
And for
I'm
the
open to
public-
any suggestions.
And for the public to understand. It's
Exactly.
not only
User-friendly.
you all, it's trying to explain what we've done after we leave here.
So I think if we just delete large A and large B under 6, we can move forward with the rest of the language in this section and then come back later with the recommended fees. So we can still move forward with clarifying any language. Is it per shooter or is it per vehicle? And that a daily use permit is required or an annual use permit is required and so on.
And just do a separate
Just-
fee schedule.
Just remove the actual dollar fees and then we'll come back and do those later.
Is everybody okay with that?
But why don't we get that resolved? Let's get that cooking. So,
Because Jen said she wants to have time to reference what other facilities are charging and bring that back to us so that we're equitable throughout the region.
I can give you 2 examples right now. I just looked up really quick. So Douglas County, we've talked about before, is a $2 drop-in, so that's their day use is $2. It is per vehicle, it's not per shooter.
Right.
There also is an annual $50 permit for the entire year for Douglas County. I just looked up Washoe counties. Washoe County is an adult drop-in for 1 day is $9. Youth and seniors are $5 per day. And then
about
there's
out of state?
separate fees for reservations.
What about out-of-state people?
There's no designation for that.
See, we have a lot of people from California coming into the
Right.
range.
And I can just tell you, I really appreciate that. I think it sounds wonderful, but unfortunately, people lie all the time because right now we do have fees throughout the park system for in-city and out of the city. And there's just, I didn't bring my driver's license, they pay cash, or there's no, I mean, it's just, people constantly lie to save that one, like $1 or whatever, and we just,
Well, granted, but when you drive into there and you have
Yeah.
California plates on your car, it's kind of hard to fight that.
I completely agree.
Oh, that's easy for
Yeah,
the
it's
range
just-
one, right? You just say it has to have a
Just try to
Nevada
skirt it.
plate. Right.
If you come into the range, you have California plates, and it's going to cost you double.
triple.
Triple. Gosh, you guys are something. Well, and I agree we can move fees to the next discussion and maybe take a motion on the rest of this interim plan.
How about if we have a drop-in daily use fee, $5 a vehicle, and a $50 annual permit, and run with that? And there's no
Stop.
issue about what county, city, state, or wherever else you're coming from. Let's keep it simple so that the staff can be able to administer this thing and put the thing together. So it's 2 fees, $5 a day or $50 for an annual permit. We're ready to rock and roll. And that's money that's
agree.
immediately going to be coming in to help our range restoration.
I actually agree with that personally. Mr.
It
Shooty?
stays with
Judy,
this
on
interim
the range
temporary.
fees, so if you have a club that's going down to like IDPA on Sundays and those members are gonna go down there and pay $20 a shoot, are they also gonna pay $5
Yes.
to get into the range?
For the, per car,
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
so they pay $5 to get in and they go pay their club fees also.
whatever they
We'll just
paid
get
for
an
the
annual
shoot,
permit.
right? On the annual permit, do we want that one to only be Carson City residents?
No. Anybody.
Why? Why would I let somebody from California come in and get an annual?
But-
Or you
but-
don't
but-
care?
Well, I guess you could monitor it.
And
if
that's
the
the
only.
thing you give the residents, is they
It-
get the placard. Everybody else pays a
Could we back up
drop-in.
a second too? We already talked about that a commercial entity is already paying a $100 annual use fee. So why would they pay an additional fee for a drop-in?
No, the commercial guy is the commercial thing is paying from his revenues. We're talking about the participants will pay for their vehicle to come in, not the commercial vendor. The commercial vendor's gonna do a revenue share with us because he's making money off the range. The individuals that are gonna shoot
Get
or
that,
do the
but what we're
class will
just-
pay
the question
$5.
was, you have a shoot, and they're coming in with 10 cars full of people, and we're gonna require them to pay a daily use amount of $10 per car, but the commercial entities already paid a $100 use fee. Is that your question?
Well, it was more for the competition clubs where you have maybe 30, 40 cars coming down to shoot on a Sunday. they have to pay a fee to that club to pay, and then now they're gonna pay an entry fee to the range. So that was my question, are you gonna charge them twice?
Yes.
But that was my question, that's the answer.
They're completely different things. And the money is used completely differently. The clubs, we're not getting money from the clubs. No, we're only getting it on the
$100
commercial,
from the
only commercial, not clubs.
The club's not considered a commercial?
No,
No.
no, no, they don't, no, they're separate, and they're separate on here.
Be okay if maybe we looked at those details with other agencies too, to try to be consistent with that, and then we come back with that part of the fee schedule about how we would be able to do that, because
Yeah,
we
but
might
what
be
we're
able to
trying to
learn,
do
I think,
here
from
is
other
give you-
agencies as well and what they're doing.
We're still trying to give you some direction that we're really looking at the $50 one, and then and I agree, $10 is too much. I'm just telling you, it's too much. $5, I don't think anywhere around anybody else is charging that, so. But then I wanted to ask one other question, when you're going to look at it, Jennifer, because I thought that at the board level, Brad, we were starting to discuss, like we did with the swimming pool, that disabled veterans are free. So I just want to throw that into your look when you put the fee together, because I think we discussed that on the annual permit only. The
Okay.
envelopes are, everybody.
We're working on our other fee schedule, and we've had requests from, especially the veteran community. We do have, like our annual passes to the MAC or the pool, 100%. If they have a 100% disability rating, they get that for free. And then we talked about if they have, I can't remember how the disability ratings work, but basically they would get 50% off for the other stuff. So that way, if they had,
Match what they get at the.
Yeah,
Look
exactly.
at what the assessor does, because he issues all the veterans exemption.
our
Funds for
system
that,
couldn't
yeah.
do, 10 different types, so we brought it down to 2, and then we talked to the veterans, and they were really in favor of that.
Madam Chair, one thing on discussing these fees. Is there anywhere in the progression here that these funds are held in a separate account for the use at the range and for?
Already discussed that several
Okay.
times.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't
It's
get
just
on
a
that.
it's just a recommendation. We don't
Okay.
get to, we don't get to control it, but we can certainly recommend it. Okay. Are we close? Let me just, for the technical legal stuff, any public comment? Chris?
Chris Carver for the record. Listening to this discussion, you talked about Tuesday through Friday for reservations. Tuesday through Saturday. Why, if the landfill's closed at 5:30, why not open it on Monday? There's no maintenance occurring at the range, so I just think in
We're
terms of,
looking for an RSO.
but if
who's
it's,
gonna do
if
it?
it's clubs and commercial, then that, it comes with the package.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
I just want you to consider that. And then on the discussion of access fees, cars versus individuals, it's been in the club's intent to tie usage of the range to education and accountability. So Ben talked specifically about liability waivers. Why wouldn't you keep that access permit? My card to use the pool is my liability waiver. And it's my assumption of responsibility that I'm not gonna, swim with bricks. But the point with the range is that we have some minimum safety education that we want to take place to reduce the potential for projectiles to leave the range. And if you tie that to an individual use fee, if you decide to impose a fee, it makes that possible. If you tie it to a car, we have what we have now, which is carloads of people coming. Who's checking that? It's not the club, and I don't think it's the Rangers, so you haven't solved anything except for creating a bureaucracy. But if I walk the line and you don't have your card to use the range, then that's an issue. But if I'm checking dashboards, I don't know who's in that car, and if that shooter is even trained to be on, has a minimum responsibility to be on the shooting line. So Those are my observations. I really wish that you would consider the three things together, the assumption of liability and the education part in conjunction with the imposition of fees.
I think when we get ready to print envelopes and print things, that we will certainly attach the liability statements within those, absolutely. Unless I-
And not being overly simplistic, I can't educate a car. I can definitely educate Joe Smith. We can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further, there isn't any further public out there, but I'll ask it just in case. Okay. Are we ready to try a motion? You ready to try it? All right, Brad, I think we've got it. I think both of us have been scratching, so maybe we'll help each other if one of us gets stuck a little. Okay, go, Brad.
I move to recommend to staff and/or the Board of Supervisors approval of the draft proposed range opening interim plan incorporating the changes read into the record, and in addition, recommending that we bring back to this committee a proposed fee schedule that would then be brought forward to the Board of Supervisors for approval.
The fee schedule would come here
The-
first to the next meeting and then.
This group would make the recommendation of approval of the fee schedule to the Board of Supervisors, who has the final authorization over that.
I second.
Okay, on discussion. The second was Mr. Blackwood? And Mr. Everybody? Oh, no. On discussion, Mr. Cooley?
Just a quick one. When we kind of touched on the liability issue Ben did, who is the ultimate decider on whether this meets that requirement or not when it comes to the city's liability?
Well, what I had indicated was that Jen has the emergency powers authority to restrict the range if there is a report of errant gunfire or unsafe actions.
Right, but
or unsafe actions, right?
I'm thinking more global as the city. Who is going to say, yes, the city will accept this liability, and no, they won't?
The recommendations of this work group go to the Board of Supervisors for authority, so that authority rests with the board.
So it rests with the board?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I'm retiring.
So then we want to clean this up, maybe send it back out just to make sure we've captured everything, and then have, at a future Board of Supervisors meeting, have it for their consideration. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure.
So we're on discussion, I just want to clarify something. So is it that she's going to retype, Ms. Budge is going to retype all this up, send it out to all of us to make sure that what we all understood it to be? Or is there authority to one or two of us to look at it and send it forward? Because otherwise we'll come back for another meeting. I just want to, my understanding, and Ben can correct me if I'm wrong. So what I typically do in other organizations is appoint, you can give the chair the latitude if you'd like to say, yes, that meets what we discussed, and it moves forward to the Board of Supervisors, because otherwise it's coming back to this body as a whole.
My thought is that you've taken the notes, so I'm okay with Jen providing a red line to you to make sure that it meets
Is
your
everybody-
notes, and if it meets your notes, then it goes forward to the board.
Because I hate to delay us another.
Yeah, whatever we need to do to get
To
this
move it
thing
on.
going and get the range open, if we can put out a public statement that says May 15th, the range is open 6 days a week, that will hit a home run with the public out there and do a lot for everybody. So I think whatever we need to do to get this implemented as quickly as possible so that we can make that statement, is the approach to take.
Except it's only going to be open to the public on Wednesday and Thursday.
And Sunday.
Well, and in
Well-
addition to the current Sunday.
But the clubs are the public.
Yes.
I
But we
mean-
need to
I mean-
say club and
Well,
commercials.
you may say that, but as a member of the public who doesn't belong to a
Yeah.
club, and
Yeah,
I see something in the paper that says that the rifle range is open 6 days a week, and then I go out there and find out I can't come in, I think we have to be very clear on how we put that notice in the paper.
any further discussion on the motion? Okay, sorry, did you have another discussion point?
Just point is, tomorrow is the Board of Supervisors, so you're talking
Won't go to that one.
the third
The
meeting
next one.
this year, this month. Okay.
There's no, we don't have
Yeah, I know.
thirds. Phew, we don't do 3 a month.
Okay.
Never mind.
So this would be submitted to them on the third week of this month of May, at your second meeting.
Yes, if we can get it done in time and submit it on an agenda item.
Okay.
So that's another good reason to just have it come back through me. We'll try, because what's our deadline?
Probably
Friday?
be the 23rd,
Yeah,
May 23rd meeting.
right.
Okay.
Oh, there isn't?
I won't even be in the country then.
Oh,
Well, we're-
I'm sorry. So it's the 2nd and the 16th.
Yeah,
Oh, I
Right.
apologize. I was looking at the wrong ways. I'm sorry. That's my fault.
May 16th. Yeah, he's like, no, we planned these right.
Right,
Make it May
I know.
16th.
I can look at the deadlines, but it's probably Friday
Yeah,
for the 16th.
Okay.
Is that-
so May 16th. We'll try for that. Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. The other portion of this item that we'll do under separate motion, and I think it was handed out to everyone. I sent it around. Everybody got the sponsorship portion that we were going to discuss. It's a single piece of paper,
It's the last page in your packet.
and I had a free, not a free, oh, there you go. There's some more over there, because I had them. Anyway, it's your late material, that's the last one in the packet. Mr. Girolani and I met. Do you wanted to, we kind of went through each of the kinds of signage that was in the sign plan. And kind of worked through, so if we want to go for that, and that's why Mr. Bonkowski had mentioned on the range perimeter signs, I think both Mr. Girolani and I thought also those weren't very visible to the public. So we really didn't think that was a big sponsorship opportunity, and so we were asking everyone, does everyone agree we don't need to worry about the boundary?
No, I would think the caution sign is the ultimate.
Okay, so everyone, we're all on the same page? That we won't try to sell sponsorships to the perimeter signs? Okay. Then we had the E-panel signs. And we thought those are installed every second shooting lane, and there's 2 per shooting bay. Mr. Girolani and I was just throwing out, that's 18 signs at $500 per year, so that we could raise $9,000 on those sponsorships. What are your guys' thoughts on that idea? And then we can come up with neat names if you want that fit a shooting range, but what are your thoughts on the ones in the bay? Mr. Cooley?
The only question I have is if we've come up with these numbers, where have we factored in what the cost of these signs are?
We had a meeting and got the costs on them. They were like, I can't remember which sign was which,
Okay.
but these prices are at least twice the actual cost of the sign.
So we're not gonna be we're gonna take in $9,000, but that's not gonna be what goes into the kitty to use for other
I
projects.
think
Part of it's gonna go to the
based
signs.
on what we had here, wasn't it like 1,800? We were gonna net $10,000.
Okay.
Let me say it that way. That's what we were aiming for, is that we were gonna get 10,000 a year net for sign, if we could get everybody, all of them sponsored. That's a better way to say that too. Mr. Tussey, if I recall at the last meeting, he mentioned 10,000, so I think Sean and I were taking a good shot at figuring out how we could have 10,000 every year. 'Cause I agree, we need ongoing maintenance money for the facility.
May I ask?
Sure.
what is the range directional signs?
That's the one in the
E-signs.
sign plan. They're all labeled. So see the ones that were
Okay,
kiosks?
so
and
that's the ones that we're
these.
looking at.
And they would just be able to, when he gets them printed or whatever, add a, maybe it's gonna say so-and-so with their little logo, Battle-Born Ammunition.
Is the other,
The
bigger
kiosk
one.
is
Yeah.
your big one.
Okay.
And that's the one where we said we could hang, I think if we talked about this, David, that we could hang 3 of them, 3 sponsorships off the big kiosk. So there'd be 3 opportunities there.
Yes, Madam Chair, that's correct. I also want to add, in the number of like signs that you have, 18, in my original request to endow for these same signs to put out, I think the request was like for 47, and that would cover the long range, not only like the covered area, but the prone area, the short range, and 2 in every one of the shooting bays. So just to keep that in mind, that there's
We could
more,
raise more.
but there's more opportunities there,
Yay.
yes.
Okay.
The ones that we had for the pistol bays were
That's the.
one on each berm, but they were stacked, so it'd be one established sign post with 2 separate sponsors on each. So there were, technically, there would be 4 sponsors per bay for the pistol bay.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt. I want to just be clear, we did apply for a grant for these signs, so I don't think we can charge for signs that we're getting funded potentially by a grant. So I just want to be careful about that.
What signs are you talking about?
So we applied for funding for all of
For the
the
sign
perimeter
itself.
warning signs.
Right.
We also, the signs that you're talking about in between
We were talking
on the
about
covered bay and the prone lines, we requested grant funding for those signs. So I just don't think we can charge additional monies for signs that were actually funded by a grant. I don't think we can profit off of that grant funded
I think what we
improvement.
were
Right.
talking about were the sponsorships, that like some business or the gun club or something with their name on
We
it.
want to attach it to the sign or I don't know. That's fine. I just want to make sure we
I was
don't.
gonna say,
You're-
we
you're
thought
at-
we could hang a little
bottom
thing
the
off of
kiosk.
the bottoms of them and put their logo and their name.
So you're advertising for that entity, which they pay for.
Right, and we
Not-
thought we
not
could
the
only
sign.
fit 1 thing hanging off the smaller ones, and then 3 could hang off the big
I
kiosk
think
sign.
my concern was just the ones that are.
sign itself.
Yeah, so like the, let's say in the long range, we have the posts that go over the cover, to hold the cover. And we're gonna have signs that go up there. Those are ones we requested from the NDOW grant. So if we pay for that sign and put that sign up, I just don't want that sign to have, sponsored by.
Right, has
Whatever-
to be sponsored
whatever-
by them.
Exactly, because
Yeah.
they funded that. So I just wanna make sure we're trying to be separate from that grant.
Right, right. So we just need to concentrate on whether you think the pricing is right, so that we can, like you said, start. We came up with 500 on the small one, 750 on the main kiosk area. You're looking at me, right? Anybody got a different answer or idea?
Based on my experience of having been hit up on multiple occasions for things similar to this, I think your pricing is a little over exuberant,
Too high?
yes. Because if you consider, you go down to the baseball diamond and you look out there in the outfield and you see signs after signs. I'll tell you what you should do. You should contact,
It's in here. It's in the packet that
What's that?
shows what they pay.
Who?
I paid $350 for the baseball and $500
So
depending
Well,
on.
yeah.
In your packet is different agencies and what they charge, whether it's a banner or, one of the flagpole signs or anything like that. So that way you could have different examples and costs. And there's some high-end ones in here and some, more affordable ones as well.
Capital City Gun Club has done that. You might give them a buzz and say, what do you get for one of your signs that you put up out there? Seems to me like they're a couple $100 a year.
I think it was like $300.
3.
300?
Lori, if you could, on these sponsors, if a sponsor wanted the whole kiosk, they could pay then, let's say the one sign was $500 and you were gonna plan to put 3 of them on that kiosk. Could you give it to one sponsor for $1,500 and allow them a bigger, splashier sign?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Money talks.
That's right.
well, that's why I don't wanna limit it to just,
Yeah, 350. Back cover 700, 1,000. We're looking 500. This is for wrestling. Carson Wrestling, so. There, I did have them. I think I have them. And again, if you want, we can type up well, actually, we did type up a formal answer here, but
You should just go for it, and if you find out you can't sell them.
then you'll come back and do them less?
You got the price too high, there's a threshold someplace, so,
Right.
man, if you guys can raise $10,000 off of selling these things, boy, I'm all in.
Anybody else? What do you think, Fred? I don't know, I think
I think-
we get hit up a lot too, and it's not usually for $100.
I think if Terry writes a check for $10,000, you give him every one of them.
Oh, I agree with you there. He can have year one as his. I agree. Year one belongs to Terry. Everybody okay with us giving this a shot? Anybody?
Absolutely.
Yes? Okay. So do I, any public comment? So do I have a motion to put this one into practice and see what we can do?
well, you're talking about all of them, all
Yeah, so.
spots?
Yeah, don't you think we should try on the permits, the envelopes, the target stands, banner signs, anything we can, everybody?
Well, I think you're gonna have an awful lot on the envelopes if you're gonna put your waiver on that. And
Okay.
date and how many, if you're using it a car, it's gonna have the space for how many people are in the car. You haven't got much room left by the time you get the warrant.
I was gonna say, are you kidding? I know.
You got the whole bag.
Well,
Yeah, but
I'm
you don't
saying
have a
let's
waiver
approve
on
that.
that
I'm
either.
saying let's approve this, Carol. If it
be a
doesn't
waiver.
fit, then we end up not selling it.
Okay,
But why not have it in our plan to give us the opportunity to try?
then go for it.
Just let's go the other way.
This is the envelope as it is, okay? Has your waiver, has all your information. This is where your sponsorship logo goes.
That's a
This all
waiver.
stays. Well, but it'll be here. It'll be on this.
Better bring your mic,
We don't care. I don't
glass.
care how small it is. as long-
Says I will be good. Amen.
We have a whole fee schedule thing. We do that in already. I mean, if something doesn't fit and we can't sell it, we can't sell it. But if we don't have the authority, the answer is definitely no.
Well, then I'm gonna make a motion that we accept this sponsorship plan.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to point out, in your packet, Exhibit C is a sponsorship agreement, so we already have the mechanism to be able to institute these. This doesn't need to go to the Board of Supervisors. We already have an approved legal document that we use for special events and other sponsorships
So we get this one
opportunities. So we can
implemented
get this
quickly.
implemented without having to go to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that completes 3B, unless I think I missed anything on 3B. We have the two components. Okay, we're on item 4A, Director's Report. Ms. Budge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. To give you a legislative update, the House of Representatives 1222 Target Practice and Marksmanship Training Support Act has passed the House and the Senate. So it's at the President's desk. And what this is the Pittman-Robertson Fund Act of 1937 funding, and it's ammunition sales. And that's the Nevada Department of Wildlife is our local fiscal agent for those funds. So the previous range grants that we've received is through this program, and it previously required a 25% match. So they're proposing reducing that match to 10%, which means every dollar that we have will go a lot further for that grant funding source. So it's, on the 5-yard line, it's not quite approved yet, and I'm not sure if it would be effective immediately, that last round of grants that we just submitted, or if it would be effective another date, but that's really good news for our funding sources. Also, the AB 84, that's the reauthorization of the Parks, Trails, and Open Space bond funds. We're still actively working with the sponsors on that. We're waiting for an amendment to come out and see what opportunities that could have. Right now, it's with the Ways and Means Committee, so it hasn't really gone anywhere in the last few weeks, but I'll continue to update you on that opportunity. Any questions on legislation before I move forward?
What was the last one, Jennifer?
AB 84, it's a reauthorization of state bonds for recreation and conservation.
And that's
And-
federal or state?
That's state. So that's something that we could apply for any park projects. The rifle range could be a potential grant opportunity. And then we met, Stephanie Hicks, the city's property manager, and myself met with a whole team at BLM. They gave us a whole team of people, from their archaeologists and biologists to their current field manager. So we really appreciate their time to meet with us. They've sent us maps and shape files of any opportunities within Carson and Lyon County. We didn't have those shape files for Lyon County, and identified a process. They're very supportive of working with us to provide an alternate location for the long term. It would be through the Recreation and Public Purpose Act, but we wouldn't actually lease the property. It would go direct to patent. The BLM just doesn't want any involvement with the lead cleanup or the operation of shooting ranges, whether a lease or otherwise. Excuse me. But they're very supportive of what we want to do. They're open to the location above Centennial Park, and requested that, we meet with Lyon County and talk about other opportunities for maybe a bi-county partnership. So that was great. They're very supportive of that. I do want to let you know that if we do that for a long term, NEPA will apply. So we will have to clear any disturbed areas. And then they typically want some sort of clearance for the whole area, because you might have overshot or lead containment, and just to see what that would entail. So there is, while the land is free, there is a cost. Oh, I apologize. So NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, and that's basically providing environmental clearances from plants and endangered species to cultural resources to wildlife. And there's a multitude of categories within that. So we would have to hire a third party to conduct those assessments, and then we would also have to pay for BLM's time to review those assessments. So it's a costly process, but it's one that we've done with all the BLM lands that we've developed previously. But I was really encouraged that they were on board with what we were trying to do. So that kept me hopeful. Any questions on that? We've had questions all today to give you an update on the design. So Dave and I met this morning at Loomis. They gave us our first set of plans, and they're doing really well. What we'd like to do is we'd like to ask for 1 to maybe 2 people from this committee to help us review design plans at every stage to make sure that we're really being thorough. It's not just having plan review in a vacuum with city staff. We'd also like to have the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club have someone to help participate in that design process. So if 1 or 2 of you are interested in that, please let me know. We do have our first set of plans. We'd like to have comments back in by Friday. So it's going to be quick turnaround so we can get the design plans complete.
Question.
Sure.
The design, we're not really redesigning the range, aren't we? Just building berms? I mean, as the range sits, it's still going to look like that.
It will. It's essentially a grading plan
Right.
to meet minimum standards identified by the NRA. But there's berm placement issues, there's grading issues, there's things that could impact, the shooting behavior and how it happens. We want to make sure that everybody is getting an opportunity to look at that. But no, we're not proposing any, significant changes. Yeah. So we will have our comments in for this initial review by the end of the week. They'll have 3 weeks to give us the 60% design. At that same time, we will have a final design for the shooting bays, as I mentioned before. The 60% design will include grading, plan quantities, borrow areas, and really start to capture how much dirt are we talking about and what does that project look like. And then we'll have 1 week to review that 60% design and then 3 weeks for our final design. So we're looking at June. So it's a pretty quick turnaround for 100% plans. Any questions on that? Anyone want to volunteer to help us review the plans? Mr. Blackwood, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. I'll be calling you. We need to meet in the next day or two.
Good.
Okay. We are going to make you do that anyway. And then I'll ask Mr. Carver to help too. Thanks.
So then that objective would state that maybe in June, you're able to go out for a bid.
Yes.
Right.
So
I mean, just so that you
actually,
understand when
prior-
it goes to bid.
Yeah, prior to that, at the 60% plans, we'll have a plan sheet for the shooting bays. And because that's a smaller project, I anticipate getting, 3 competitive quotes for that specific portion of the project, and then we could get that moving forward. Yeah.
Or you'll put it out to bid. I don't know if you'll get 3 bids, but you'll put it out to bid and whoever responds, correct?
Well, 3 quotes. We'll request 3 quotes, and if they're not responsive and we get one,
Right.
we can award that,
Correct.
that quote.
Okay, just
Yeah.
want to be clear. It's
Not a
gonna be
formal bid because it
requirement
won't
to
be
get-
over $100,000. Yeah. But in June, we'll have the remaining part of the range identified and can go to formal bid for that. Any questions on design? We already talked about the public hours, so we don't need to revisit that. And then I just wanted to give you an update of the Board of Supervisors approving their tentative budget. The board was very supportive of our intent and to show their commitment for the rifle range. They identified $250,000 for capital improvements from 2 separate funding sources. So $250,000 total that would be available after July 1st. The intent would be to use that for a future match for a grant so we could get even more improvements. So a very substantial contribution. And then they also identified funding for a full-time employee. Any questions?
Say that again?
They identified funding for a fully benefited full-time employee for the, dedicated to the rifle range.
For the range.
Come on, Mr. Blackwood, I'm looking for a clap over there.
Are you in shock?
Yes, the pimple just got bigger, I think.
There you go.
And that's all I have. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any further questions, Ms. Budge? Nope. Okay, we're going to move on to any announcements. We've probably already done these, but Member Girolani, any further thoughts? Or we've,
Sean Gelani for the record. We did talk about, I sent you guys the flyers on the rangers, the park ranger items, so.
Iron Ranger.
Iron Ranger.
Park Rangers.
Ranger.
And they're in
Something
the
Ranger.
pack, they're in your packet.
Right.
That looks like a cool system.
Yeah, it's I think they do those nationally and in Canada, so whatever you want to do. I think we only really need one. Maybe 2 at the most, one at the gate, one at the bottom there. 2?
I do too, just in case they,
You're right, one at the gate and one at the range.
right,
Okay.
right.
And then, yeah, they're pretty easy, whether you want to go to that company or go to Prison Industries to bid it out,
Forgot about that.
to get the best bang for your buck.
That might be another sponsorship opportunity as well.
For the Ranger.
That's it.
I think Ms. Budge kind of went over the funding already that we successfully got from the Board of Supervisors. So we have a full-time staff member starting July 1st. Well, if they can get it hired July 1st, but it was authorized to be hired, let's put it that way. And then the $250,000 to be used for improvements. And then just so that you see the commitment also, this fiscal year, the board paid for Loomis and Associates, so, to do the work. So I want to put that out there. Questions, Mr. Blackwood?
Relative to funding, at our last meeting, Terry Tussey made the offer to contribute $10,000 as a means of getting some funding available for the range construction, and then that money could perhaps be used for matching funds from NDOT. And after thinking about his offer of contribution, I had this brainstorm, and I said, what if, instead of him putting up $10,000 of his money, what if he put up one of his custom-made 1911s? And then with that as a backstop, we went to other people and said, okay, we've got a Terry Tussey 1911. How about Franklin Armory, you put up one of your ARs, and we go to some of the gun stores and say, okay, we've got an AR and a 1911, we need some ammunition, we need some earplugs, we need gun cases, we need holsters, we need whatever else, and we put together a package, and that now becomes a raffle. And we sell raffle tickets to win this package, so it probably wouldn't take very much effort to put together a $10,000 package. And then we sell raffle tickets at $20 a pop or 6 for $100 or whatever you want to do. But this would allow the shooting community to be able to participate in the restoration, because the key to this thing, because I've had some indirect conversations with several people who could contribute goods to this effort. The only question that they had was, can I be guaranteed that the money raised by this will absolutely and solely be used in the reconstruction of the range? And if that's the case, then yeah, I'm probably going to be in. So anyway, just an idea. Just thought I'd bounce that off the committee and see what they think.
That can be guaranteed in two different ways. The money can be given through the Park Foundation that can then grant it with a specific intent donation. And so the city gets donations from many, many sources, but they are specific intent. And so then we have to spend them according to the intent. So certainly we can work an avenue to make that happen. And maybe that's a great idea for us to talk about at the next meeting, an idea, because we could then sell the raffle tickets or whatever. And maybe when we have a groundbreaking or a ceremonial cutting of a ribbon for the reopening of the pistol bays, it could be awarded. Something that makes, again, the community to come out together.
Yeah.
So just a thought. I like that. So, Ms. Howe?
Under discussion, tell me about the employee. Are they going to be a range safety officer, a range through the forestry?
Park
I mean,
range.
where, are they going to be employed by the Parks Department?
Yes.
Madam Chair, Jennifer Budge, so they would be an employee of the city. We have to work through a job description, official title, and all of that to make sure it's equitable within the region. But at minimum, yes, they would be a NRA certified range safety officer.
Not law enforcement, though.
They would not be post-certified because then they have to work for the sheriff's office.
Okay.
So we have a lot of details to work through. It's something that came through at the last minute of the budget process, but they did identify the funding, and I think that's the important part of this.
The other question, go, I lost it.
The intent, Lori and I brought this forward, and the intent was that the discussions from this work group have shown us that there are a lot of responsibilities that the city may need to cover, and Parks doesn't currently have the staff to do that. And we were in the middle of the budget approval process at the time, so we didn't have time to put together a job description, but we were able to kind of sketch out that it would be a supervisory position. Let's get the position approved. Let's allocate the funding for that in the budget. And then we're going to have to clarify all of the details as we move forward. But if we had missed the opportunity, we're looking at another year before we can bring that forward.
Well, the reason I'm asking the question was setting up this fee schedule. With setting up this fee schedule and starting to charge people, we're going to get some, as we saw when we toured the range, that are going to be coming in the back door. do we have a code that's gonna set up that will be a fine for people not coming through the gates and paying the fees? If we've got an employee out there, is there already a code in place for that?
We'll work that out when we print the stuff and the information for the envelope. We'll put the codes that indicate if you don't pay, you're subject to
X
blah, blah,
amount
blah,
of
blah, blah, blah,
fines.
fine.
Okay.
Adequate city
Right.
codes to
To
address
handle that
And we can
already.
put that everywhere.
But it'll be printed on the envelopes and things and signs, yes.
So that employee would then be the one that would be checking
And writing them a
and governing
misdemeanor little
that they're
citation
paying
or whatever.
when they come in.
Mhm.
So all of the question that we had before about monitoring, that just answered the questions.
Details to be forthcoming. We're not
Right.
making any
We
commitments at
didn't
this
answer,
meeting.
yes. That's a good way to say it. Okay, thank you. Any other just general announcements from anyone? Okay, then we're on to item 6, future agenda items. So we have fees. Oh, sorry, Mr. Blackwood.
I have a long-range report.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were just doing fundraising. Go ahead.
No, I'm multitasking today. This probably is not going to set well, but take a swing at it anyway. There's a strong possibility that the belief that we have 10 to 20 years before the gun range needs to be relocated is possibly naive. This concept is based on the single issue that time when the dump and the range will be in conflict. Unfortunately, the temporary closing of the range put a bullseye on the range, and now every reporting of a real or suspected round hitting a building, a vehicle, or person will be blamed on the shooters at the range, even though the round could have come from someone irresponsibly shooting in the bush. The anti-gun lobby will proceed with extreme vigor, do everything they can to close the range. That, coupled with the anti-gun bias by the media and most politicians, will constitute the continual encroachment resulting in the range closing. I suggest we initiate a 5-year plan. That in 5 years, we are prepared to begin construction on the new range site. If in 5 years we find that relocation is not warranted at that time, then it can be delayed. But the land, funding, and design will be in place when needed. So this is a plan I suggest. In 3 years, we have the land located and secured. In 3 years, we have the funding secured to complete the range design. In 5 years, we have the funding in place to begin construction, and that the construction be completed in 6 to 7 years. That's assuming that we are pushed by the timetable. If we find out that we don't have to move that fast, then we can push that out, but we at least need to have the land secured and the design completed in this time period, in my opinion, so that we're ready to go. Because I think that we're going to get bit in the backside with people doing everything they can to close our range down on us.
Thank you. This is a non-voting item, so it's just a report. Thank you. So we're going to move on to agenda item number 6, which I had a fee schedule was listed for future agenda item based on today's discussion. Do we have any other future agenda items that someone would like?
I think
Mr. Bonkowski?
that maybe we're not ready to have a specific item on this for action, but at least discussion on the item that was just brought up, the timing of a relocation, because it's problematic to look at a 5-year timetable for relocation. First of all, I don't think you can get through the BLM patent process that quickly. Secondly, we have financial commitments that we would have to repay if we move that quickly. So I think it would be good to have a discussion so we can lay out the time constraints that we're under from our side so that we can try to marry that up with a plan. Because I agree with you, Bob, that we need to be planning this out today. But the 5-year plan is not going to work for a couple of reasons. But we do need to have an open discussion about what are the constraints from both sides And how do we compromise and try to come up with the best plan? And we should be starting that now.
So we'll add at a future meeting, an action item then for the timing on relocation. Discussion, right.
What my concern is that in 2000, we started this discussion, and it was never followed through on, and now we find ourselves in this position of where, had we pursued the beginning of this discussion in 2000, this problem would already be solved, put to bed, and we'd have a new shooting facility. So my only concern is if we don't set ourselves a goal of a time limit to get at least the basics done, that it'll never get done, and one day we'll just have no place to shoot.
Thank you. The next item was to look at a possible field trip to the rifle and pistol range. Does anyone feel we need to do a field trip? Nick?
Nick Fontenez, for the record, I'd like to comment on that. This Sunday, I had the pleasure of going out and talking with the range safety officer to see what was going on at the range on a Sunday, as well as having a meeting with the president of the Carson Pistol Glen Club. So I maybe not an organized field trip where we all go, but I would like to plead to the group to everybody take a look at actual operations and what's going on out there day to day during this interim agreement.
Do you want to share, were you illuminated on information that's helpful? What?
It gave me a better idea of who's actually out there and at what hour and at what capacity the range safety officer is actually enforcing these rules. And it, in my opinion, would be bothering me while I'm shooting, which was minimal. So I think that was helpful for me to see that.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Blackwood?
any of you that go out to the range, I encourage you that when you go around the second switchback, that you pull over to the side and you look over the edge. Because what you're looking at there is the rifle range, the shooting end of the rifle range. So if somebody wants to wing an errant round, they could start picking off the cars coming down the road up there. So that's just another one of those areas that you don't think too much about until you start saying, well, what are we're talking about bouncing around over into the dump. What about slinging around up at a car coming around that switchback up there? So those are the reasons why you need to go out to the range and walk it and look at it and see what's going on. Because we need to have a concrete barrier at the end of that rifle bay that's big enough that somebody can't shoot over it and shoot somebody coming down the road.
So I'm getting the general consensus that we don't need an organized one for all of us to attend? But I don't know, I'm betting I'm betting one of those membership signs is coming in my way or something, but yeah, she's like, oh. Okay, then we will not schedule that, but I certainly like Nick's thought that if you can go on a Sunday and just for yourself, go see what's happening. I know maybe we already do it because I've been there several times, Carol, but okay. How about we go to final public comment then? Thank you, Mr. Carver.
Chris Carver for the Carson Rifle and Pistol Club. I did meet with Nick earlier this week or last week, and I do appreciate the fact that at least a couple of you showed up out on Sunday to see what's actually going on at the range when the public's using it. We continue to have a huge issue with using target stands. You've seen this flyer before. There's nobody collecting performance metrics out there that represents this body. So the club's doing that for our RSOs. But the point that we'd like to make is between 40 and 60% of our visitors to the range, the patrons that are using the range, don't come with a target stand. And what's problematic about that is that we try to make some accommodations, and I've talked to Jennifer about this, to help them shoot anyway by placing a paper target or a used target that somebody else has discarded in the trash against the backstop and allowing them to shoot. That means they're shooting pistols at 54 yards and rifles at a minimum of 100. Or they're going down to the bays and moving inside the bay, which is absolutely what we intend. What we would like, the club would like, is that this body and the Board of Supervisors and Parks and Rec explore the opportunity to give a request for proposal out for one of the gun stores here in town to provide target stand material at the range when the range is open to the public. And this would eliminate, in some cases, we've turned folks away from using the range, but it would eliminate the friction that's occurring at the range and increase the compliance with acceptable shooting behavior that's out there. Because if you show up on a Sunday with your bag of bullets and a gun and don't have a target to shoot at, there's no place besides Sportsman's and Cow Ranch that are open that have the materials that you need to shoot at. So we would like to see a vendor out there to sell uprights and target stands. The club does have some concrete target bases, but we don't want to put them out on the range to have them either graded over or destroyed. So we do want to work with Parks and Rec to provide those bases, and that would allow the public just to bring uprights, cardboard, and targets. But there needs to be a solution to this rule, and we're looking to you to help us get that done.
Thank you,
So,
Mr.
again,
Carver.
Thank you for the folks that did come out on the range. It's going to get really busy here real soon. The weather's getting better.
And I think one of your ideas, we started the actual implementation, you might not, on the sponsorship plan, we do have a target stand discussion on that, so I think you're on the right path. We may have to, on a future agendize a more robust opportunity that you're talking about, but certainly we already adopted with a yes for, like you said, maybe some store sponsor, something with target stands. Absolutely agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonkowski?
Just, Chris, for clarification, is what you're saying or suggesting that we would allow a gun store or a vendor to, say, take an awning out there on Sundays, and they would have a spot there where they would be available for that person that comes out and doesn't have a target stand to sell them a target stand?
That's exactly what we're proposing. A vendor with, I don't know if an awning would do it, but a truck. Similar to what the sheriff has. He has a truck that has an RV that has uprights, backing, target materials, tape, staplers, shooting or eye protection, hearing protection. We're not advocating you're selling ammo or guns out there, but the safety equipment that you need to comply with the city rules, that's what we need. And it's an opportunity for a commercial entity within the city.
Chris, do you think the opportunity is great enough for a store to bring all of that out? Most people do. Do you not agree? Bring theirs. You've got the odd occasion where they don't, but you're asking a vendor to come out and bring all of this equipment for the day in the hopes that somebody doesn't and he'll come buy it from me.
The overwhelming majority of our RSOs, and I've worked the range in the evening shift for the last 4 weekends, they don't bring their targets.
Is that right?
Yes. The people that do are IDPA, our organized clubs, and of course the CCW people do. But the recreational shooter, like I said, between 40 and 60% of those people don't bring appropriate targets, and most people don't bring a target, period.
But they're not bringing refrigerator and TVs out anymore, are they?
No, but
Good.
it doesn't help when a person shows up with, like, as I said, a bag of bullets and a gun and wants to shoot at the ground in front of him. And we have, instead of an educational opportunity, we have to protect everybody else that's on the shooting line from that poor behavior. So we need to get targets out there. We've also asked Parks to consider letting us have providing a box of clay pigeons that we could allow shooters to put out on the berms to shoot at. But shooting at the floor of the range is what caused the bullets to go to the landfill. And that's still happening. And I think Nick was out there this Sunday. I think you heard the same speech from one of our RSOs, and you probably saw it. Any more?
Yeah, I guess if it didn't work and it wasn't profitable, then they wouldn't go out again. But it's probably worth a try.
Right.